What is up, my friends? This is the Protect Your Neck podcast, and I'm your host, Dan Tom. Analyst, as you could find over at MMA Junkie as well as linemovement.com. But on this here program, the Protect Your Neck podcast, we break down high-level MMA, but in a slightly different way. That's right, on the rare UFC off weeks, or really MMA off weeks. It's so crazy, the schedule. We try to kind of look back, refresh history, and not just fill content in a mundane way, but try to make it fun for everybody. And to do that, I need a co-host for this top 5 topic, which I'll let him set up because it is his topic. You're familiar with it if you're familiar with his podcast, the Heavy Hands podcast at Heavy Hands MMA. It is Connor Ruebusch at Boxing Bush, BUSCH, for those of you unfamiliar. What's up, Connor?
Hey, Dan. How you doing, man? It's really good to be back on. Appreciate you asking me on for a second time.
Yeah, well,
I assume I'm the first guest who's ever come back to do this show a second time, so I'm really honored by that.
I'm sure you are. Just don't talk to Zane Simon or however you affectionately refer to him over there. Just don't talk to him about his guest spots.
I almost got you. You almost just blatantly insulted Zane because you're so used to hearing us do it.
It is. I am a listener. As I do shout to my audience for them to listen as well. You do a great job, not just on Heavy Hands, but the Vivi with the aforementioned Zane Simon, who, yes, has appeared in, maybe to the disgust of Connor, will probably appear on this show again. But yeah, I had to have Connor back because I was just joking with him like before we rolled. I'm like, yeah, dude, I already did a replay version of like the last time I had you on for the top 5 hook KOs in 2018, and it's such a good episode. I almost wanted to replay it again, and I'm like, I can't do it. I got to have him back on. What am I doing here? So thanks, man.
Good. I just kind of stumbled through it last time, so that gives me great confidence that we're going to produce another classic here because I'm about as well prepared as I was then.
Well, this one's let's be honest, this one's kind of a one that we don't have to really prepare for. I'm a prep nut even, Connor, and admittedly, and this isn't to deflate anybody's hopes because I'm very excited about this show, as should you, but I maybe only went back to watch fights for one fighter, and that was about it. That was the length of I watched 2 fights, 2.5 fights.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I got Fight Pass and YouTube ready here. I might play some footage while we talk, give myself a couple reminders, but I know who these freaks are.
Well, this is the reason why I know it is not just because I listen to Heavy fans, but I sentiment Connor as I'm gonna let him set it up because it is his topic, and I do want to give credit where credit's due as far as you guys playing with this theme on the show, but. As far as us giving the top 5 treatment, let's go ahead and set it up for my listeners as far as athletic cheaters. Because it's not too literally in each direction, but there's a nice middle ground, and I don't want to step over it. I tried to explain it the best I could in the tweet. Hopefully it was up to your approval, but explain to my audiences, Connor.
Oh, yeah. No, it's one of those, it's my specialty topic in that it is made to be, like, misrepresented, It's made to, like, make people mad because they deliberately choose a provocatively strong way of talking about just a fact of life and competition. It's top 5 athletic cheaters is what we're talking about today. And what that means is that being an athlete is cheating. People who know me may know that I love journeymen and mid-tier fighters. I have long said that if you want to evaluate the strength of a coach or camp, for example, don't look at their top contenders. You don't look at their super athletic top guys. You look at their most bang average fighters, and that to me is the best way to evaluate just how thorough an understanding of the game a coach has. So, I think John Crouch at the MMA Lab is a fantastic MMA coach because he produces, he came out with Ben Henderson, who's a great athlete, but has also produced I'm forgetting his name now. What was the Yauzi Meza, who was a very capable UFC fighter. He had a hard losing skid and still came back to win. They're all really well-rounded, prepared guys. So that's basically the reason for the topic is that you don't look at the athletes, the superb athletes, because they're cheating. They learn everything easily. They have gigantic margins for error. They can improvise, basically, in a way that normally gifted or ungifted fighters can't. That they can just sort of pick things up and try things. And I think it really is the margin for error is the big thing. If you're way faster or stronger than your opponent, you can do things with good technique, and it's going to be way more effective than the good technique of your less gifted peers. But you can also do things with bad technique, and a lot of times it's still going to be more effective than the good technique of your peers. So should we define athleticism? Because it's always a very nebulous sort of term.
Define it and then kind of parlay it, if you will, as far as we're going to be applying it into this topic, which not necessarily negative, but again, hopefully you're getting the gist. And probably is no surprise that guys like me and Connor both kind of appreciate and love a similar ilk. So it's kind of a no surprise that I do sentiment with the athletic cheaters. So go ahead, Connor, and define athleticism as you will, and then kind of parlay it into the way we're going to apply it.
Because we're nerds, right? We like the guys who have to be technical to succeed. Right?
Yeah.
They don't get to coast. They have to do it right, and that's what we like. Yeah. So the way I understand it, and I think the way it's generally used by commentators, right? For UFC commentators, athletic either means explosive, strong, powerful. Sometimes you wrap cardio into this. Sometimes durability can be considered a factor as well. One that I always take care to point out is proprioception, balance. These sorts of just the ability to improvise and maintain position in insane, unpredictable scrambles that you could never have trained for these positions. You just have a feel for how your body is situated. And so for UFC commentators, athletic either means that, or it means not white. And,
yes.
We're going to go ahead and stick with the former definition. That's the one I try to use. So explosiveness, I think, is, again, a term somewhat loaded over the course of UFC history, but one that I think is the marker of what I consider capital A athleticism. It's the ability to generate sudden force, to change direction super quickly. And that is often the appearance of explosiveness, I think, is often an indicator of good balance, good proprioception, good timing. Because it's not just about being able to explode, it's about being able to do it at the right moment, to save yourself from being upended at the right moment. Explosiveness, speed, power, possibly other physical attributes, chin, reach. Reach doesn't really feel like athleticism. But it's like I said, it's gray, sort of muddy boundaries. So
now having these things to the extent of whether or not they would be cheating, and not in the literal term, hopefully you guys are understanding our tongue here, is what we're going to parse out and kind of rank, if you will. Although, as per usual, numbers and people were asking about does it have to be exactly this? I'm for people not familiar, the rules on all topics and everything in this podcast is super laid back. The lunatics run the asylum. And as me and Connor discussed kind of off air, when you do these articles of ranking things, I know many of my colleagues have, you soon, or hopefully soon, fast learn that it doesn't matter where you rank it, people are always going to be displeased. So I'm excited to do this episode. Don't get me wrong, but in no way do the numbers and the rankings really matter. And especially for an episode like this, where I believe there's going to be a lot of crossover. This is going to be an episode that's probably high in crossover. However, if there's crossover, without saying names, because we don't know each other's lists, we're gonna be surprised along with you, audience. But if there is crossover, you can be rest assured that those names deserve it. So,
yeah, there are a couple of obvious candidates. In fact, I think 3 of my candidates are fairly obvious, and 2 are hopefully less so. So we'll see. If we have all 5 the same picks, that would be amazing. But yeah. I think we'll have a little diversion.
Yeah, same here. In fact, as we get toward my top 3, it really takes a turn for more of the, let's just say, the cheater side of the topic.
Yeah, and a couple of them are the ultimate cheaters in that they are superb athletes, but also they pay attention to their fundamentals. So those are the guys that go really, really far.
Yeah, and we'll definitely parse out those because there's a lot of different contexts and arguments you could make. There's a lot of high-ranking popular fighters were in the mentions, which we'll get to. Thank you, listeners, at the PYN podcast to contribute. And if you're watching on YouTube, give it a like and a subscribe. Thank you. But there's also really bad divisions and really bad fighters whom this could also apply for. So that's kind of the fun part of this topic. We could really be across the board. Connor, I usually offer the steering wheel to the guests, and we do a Chinese fire drill throughout, which we're probably going to do here with the crossover. Do you feel particularly strong about your number 5 that you want to lead off, or how do you want to do it?
I'm happy to lead with it. I think it's hopefully one of my less conventional picks.
Cool. That's what I usually do for number 5 as well. So let's hear yours, sir.
All right. So now, you could argue this is an obvious pick as well, but let's see. Okay, number 5 for me, Tyrone Woodley. All right. And it's obviously the man can pick up new skills because his acting performance that we've all seen on Twitter lately, unbelievable. Normal people can't pick up skills that quickly. You know what I mean?
Gosh. Oh my gosh. I hope he didn't come from a method acting school, Connor. I really hope no one talked to him.
We'll know if he ever fights again and has a substantially smaller cut. So anyway, I picked Tyrone Woodley because I think Tyrone Woodley is a great example of a style, a process that would not have succeeded without his innate gifts. Because this is the thing I think people failed to understand for a long time. And I don't fault people for this. Like, we're generally very results-driven when it comes to evaluating what works and what doesn't work in MMA. So people saw Tyrone Woodley's style working. The man won a lot of fights in a row. He was a welterweight champion. And it got to a point where he had made enough defenses that people were, I think, ludicrously talking about him as the greatest welterweight of all time. When he shares a division with another man that both of us may have picked. Jake Shields is who I'm talking about.
Sure.
So, here's the thing. Tyrone Woodley puts his back to the cage, doesn't move his feet. He fires one punch at a time, and it's not a jab. He almost never sets it up with the jab when he's in that more evasive defensive style. He relies on parries and hand traps to protect himself. It's a really, really shallow game. And we've seen recently, like, once he basically faced people who were comfortable that they could wrestle with him, or people who were actually effective pressure fighters, we saw that, like, his game falls apart utterly when it's just taken out of this super narrow lane. And yet, he was UFC welterweight champion 4 times in a row. He had 3 defenses? I can't quite recall. But
yeah, it was like 3 defenses like within a year, I think. So the resume was definitely like impressive, and I think people were hyping off of that and then pontificating, going, he's the best ever. But yeah, that was like 3 within that year.
Yeah, and it became clear that if he had just faced a similarly athletically gifted person who also had the right style to beat him, his game had never had to develop. And that's the thing that you also get with supreme athletic cheaters sometimes. It's the only thing balancing the scale ever in the favor of the average guys. Is that because the athletes don't have to develop games that are as deep, they tend to have much broader, shallower games. They can be beaten by less athletic specialists, you know? But even then, Damian Maia is a less athletic specialist. His game didn't work at all against Tyrone Woodley. And it's not like Tyrone fought a particularly smart fight. Like, he just rode these super thin margins the entire time he was champion, and just kept getting away with it. And that's what athletic cheating is really about, is getting away with things.
I like that you mentioned that too, whether they're getting away with it just because they're athletic and are that archetype where they choose to not maybe, adapt or add to their game like Woodley. But you just picture these figures sitting atop the mountain, and like you said, when they are that athletic and they're so dependent upon it, you can sneak up on them. It won't always work. They can turn their back and, sprawl out on your head like Damian Maia, but you can sneak up on them. I also like your previous shout, by the way, of good coaches for the John Crouch. I don't talk about him enough or give him, and that is a fantastic example, particularly how you watch their fighters in their get-up game. They're all well-trained, kind of like wrestlers as far as that get-up game off the cage meta. They've been doing it before it's kind of was popularized at a mass level, you could argue.
That is always what stands out about them is the scrambling, the get up, like I don't know. I think it's a general MMA process thing they all have really well. Like, they all know what the cage is for, how to use it. They all know not to hesitate, not to accept takedowns. It's just good coaching. And
rounding it back to Tyrone Woodley, I remember asking, this is pre-MAGA, not shtick, but, MAGA stuff, and before he fought Maia, asking Colby Covington, like, was talking to him about that, about Brian Barberena, who obviously is like not an athletic killer, right? He's not a guy that would be on this list. And for what it's worth, just speaking strictly technically, without the cameras on or whatever, Colby was like, yeah, that guy was the toughest guy I fought. Up until, keep in mind, this was before Maya and the real tough guys, granted, but that still says something, about that get-up meta. And you look in the fight, he had to keep working for the same thing. Now, luckily, in that fight, like he did with Woodley, your number 5 as we round it back, Colby's athleticism kind of saved him. And to your point about Woodley, once he ran into another athlete who was just willing to do more, whether you like Colby's style or not, just willing to do more, washed him out.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's a great one. He could have easily been on my top 5 anywhere, to kind of point how these numbers are meaningless, because even though Woodley is not on my top 5, like, he could be right up there at like number 1 or 2, because there have been plenty of times where I'm like, if you just, the fighting close margins works the other way too, because whether it's rooting interest or whatever, even betting interest, sometimes you're like, you could just do a little bit more to this guy. Trust me, I know he's scary looking, but if you do more, he's going to crumble,
Yeah, but it's just the mere threat of that speed, that power, the ability to change everything with one punch. You're not supposed to be able to do that. I mean, I know that's a fundamental part of sports like boxing and MMA, is that one punch can change everything. But, like, we call that a puncher's chance for a reason. It's not something to be relied upon. And Woodley relied upon it.
Awesome. Now it's a great number 5. As we go to my number 5, I'm also glad that to build upon a previous note you made about race, is because when I was coming across my list, I'm like, wow, my list is looking awfully dark. I better mix it up fast before somebody. And by the way, if you're not watching or familiar, I am a person of color. Let's relax there. But I don't want any of the phobias, being thrown my way, right? And no. But all joking aside, I don't want to, shout to whoever in the Fight Site comments said every episode with Dan devolves to race science, and you probably are correct. But
we dabble in phrenology over at Heavy Hands. We say heavy hands, but it's really more heavy brows, heavy occipital ridges. All of these things we factor in as well.
Yeah, skull analysis, please. Heavy Hands podcast. I don't get that deep, but that said, you want to talk about a guy who is part simian. Listen, it's a white guy. It's a white guy.
Okay, all right. I was gonna say
I had to get some white. I had to get some white on this list, but I just remember like being at UF, and I recently shared UFC 84 comes up on this podcast a lot. Connor and I recently shared a story from being live at the weigh-ins there, and it was BJ Penn versus Sean Shirk. He had Vanderlei. He had all these big names, but like, before those guys come out, the prelim fighters got to come out. And you got Usman Palhares making his debut. So you've got this crazy guy who looks like he's been let out of a cage with a giant scar in his chest. And he's literally like, roaring to the audience. And I'm looking at my buddy Steve like, what are we watching? And then like a couple matchups later, for Christian Wellish's opponent comes out making his debut. And his name is Shane Carwin. And this guy, at this point, this guy looks like he's half simian, half Super Saiyan. At this point, I'm asking my buddy Steve, like, they got Dr. Moreau letting dudes out of cages back there? Like, what is going on? Like, he does not look human, Shane Carwin, people. If you're not familiar for whatever reason, go look him up. And of course, it wasn't Dr. Moreau's lab. It actually was Darwin's waiting room, because Tito Ortiz would later take the stage with his Dana is my bitch t-shirt. That was that infamous weigh-in.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
was it Dana's? Which came first, Dana's my bitch or Gay Mesger is my bitch? Do you remember that when he called Guy Metzger gay?
That was before, that was the Guy Metzger one was prior. Yeah, that was his infamous callback. It was clever for Tito though. If you really look in hindsight for the sample size he's given us, that might have actually been one of his better moments actually, which is crazy to think.
The trash talk equivalent of like an Anchorman reference is about as clever as it gets for Tito. Referencing things. That's the standby of the not clever.
You want to talk about hard ceiling? There it is. There it is, folks.
Talking about his skull, right?
Yeah, that too. Yeah, back to the phrenology. Jesus Christ. Anyways, but Shane Carwin is just, he too had a ridiculous skull, because I wrote in parentheses versus Gonzaga here. Just go watch this fight if you're going to we'll go back and watch one Shane Carwin fight. He literally takes like 3 or at least 2 solid right hands, but I believe it was like 3 right hands, and the last one like clearly kind of almost had him stunned. And then Gonzaga gets in on a single, drives him to the fence, like steers him to the and Carwin's like super stiff. Like Gonzaga was able to look like a pro boxer. Like he literally gets out of the way like a like I don't know, the matador, and then gets Carwin circled toward the cage. Like Carwin made him look like Gonzaga looked like a lightweight. You know what I'm saying? And Gonzaga ends up taking him down. Like starts passing from half guard against the cage, like a death spot for heavyweight competent grapplers, even in that era. And Carwin just freakishly gets up, not using anything resembling of the get-up meta of today, and eats a check right hook off of the break. And after Gonzaga check right hooks him, he resets to orthodox to go a straight 1-2. And Carwin, with no head movement at all, just plows right through it with a right hand that wasn't even chambered. It was like everyone like that got excited about Bruce Lee's punch and are like still like simping over that should absolutely be simping over Carwin Gonzaga, because he actually does it. He does like the 1-inch punch and knocks Gonzaga dead, to where Rogan on commentary is literally doing that thing where he's laughing because he can't get the words out. It's such a stupid finish, as is athletic cheaters in an obvious division like heavyweight. Any thoughts on that one, Connor?
I just want to point out that stupid finishes are really one of the most reliable byproducts of cheating athleticism. Like Cody Garbrandt. He's not on my list, but he's an athletic cheater. That guy's a great athlete. His finish of Rafael Assunção is one of the ugliest knockouts I've ever seen. That counter should not have worked. The Carwin one is absolutely a classic stupid finish. Go on.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to share a quick thing. And again, speaking of odd shouts to give or people's highest moments, I will say one of Brendan Schaub's probably the highest moments. I'm positive it's him, and I'm gonna guess it was from an earlier Joe Rogan podcast, because no offense to either, I haven't listened to either in quite some time, but I do remember something from years back, Connor. I think it was maybe one of Brendan's maybe first appearances. He was sharing training stories of training with Shane Carwin. And this is probably like maybe why they thought Brendan was funny and decided to push him as a comedian, because this was actually a funny story, although it really was just about him receiving head trauma. But how he would pull up to practice and like have second thoughts because the trauma was so bad of training with Shane Carwin, that he would pull into the car. And I never sparred heavyweights or at that level or anything, but even like for certain practices where it was like hard sparring or team practice, I would be kind of scared to go sometimes, man. Like, I totally not picking on Brendan. But Brendan's saying he's scared shitless. He gets to the parking lot of Grudge and he doesn't even want to get out of the car. And he's like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna text him, say I'm sick, and then all of a sudden his phone would go off, and he would just go, reading it in Carwin's voice, like, "Hey, Brendan, see you out there in the car. You want to come in and train?" And then I just imagine like Brendan turning around and there's just a demented Carwin staring through the window, waiting for his play toy to come in. And I love that story, Connor. I love that. And I'm like, that must have been scary as hell to be his training partner.
Yeah, Carwin just sort of crouching in the corner, like picking his teeth with a bone. You know,
you want to get some rounds in?
Yeah, it's a good one. It made me, it makes me think of, because I don't know, I think, for example, Dustin Poirier is another guy who I think is underappreciated for his athletic ability, to be honest.
Sure, yeah.
Especially if we start considering things like natural power as an athletic attribute. And in the same way as this knockout of Carwin's, like, I think the moment when Dustin really turned a corner is when he figured out that he could literally just throw his hands at people. He didn't have to load up. He didn't have to throw his body weight around. Just like he's tossing a baseball at their face. Just a game of catch. And there's a counter in his fight with Holloway that looks a lot like this Carwin one, where he's even more like unstructured. Like his feet are out of position, he's retreating, and he just pops the left hand out there, and Max runs into it, and it snaps his head back like he just ran into a lamppost. This definitely is a good example of that Gonzaga fight to show why Carwin doesn't even have to throw it well or chamber it or anything. He just has to put it in front of the other guy's face, and it just deads him.
And by the way, you want to see like an animated younger Trevor Whitman. He was not displeased at all. I think he says something along the lines of like, "That's fucking right." And he's just like so jacked up for Carwin after getting this knockout. It's great to see. And I will also bring up when he. I'm pretty sure if I didn't actually see Frank Mir in person since then, I would have thought that Shane Carwin killed Frank Mir, by the way, back at UFC 111. And just a fun side anecdote story. You'll appreciate this, Connor. I used to have a job as like reconstruction. We'd go into people's houses that were occupied, like units and apartments. We'd have to have it tethered off with plastic, and we'd go into the rooms and yada yada. And there was this guy with his son, and they must have TiVo, like I think the TiVo just was still kind of relatively maybe new at this time, and they hadn't watched the fights yet. And they're like, okay, I'm like, my guys are going to go in here and work. You guys are going to be chilling in the living room. He's like, yeah, we TiVo'd the fights from Saturday. We haven't seen him yet, so I'm just going to watch him with my son. And I'm like, oh, all right, cool. And I'm kind of nerding out because I'm like, I'm obviously a fan, right? And I'm in the kind of the next room, but I can hear and see through the plastic. And this fight's coming up, and I know what's going to happen. And I hear the guy go to his son. He goes, all right, our guy Frank Mir's coming up. And they're both like rubbing their hands. I know it's evil. And I don't have anything against Frank Mir. I've been on his podcast. Shouts to him. Shouts to Richard Hunter. But man, did the evil part of me, Connor, get excited. I'm like, oh, because you knew what was coming. You knew what was coming. And I had to see what their reaction. And they were just the shock and horror. They, too, thought Frank Mir was dead. I just had to share that.
I'm sure if I hated me, I mean, more than I already do, and I could have had the opportunity to watch myself as a third party experiencing, like, Jose Aldo getting knocked out by Conor McGregor, I would also relish the pain on my face. The stunned disbelief,
Geez.
When it's that brutal and sudden, it's just like, there's no, it's just a vacancy fills you, an emptiness. You have to distance yourself from what you're feeling until you can process it. I mean, that's what Shane Carwin does to people.
Yeah. That is a gift from the universe, though. I think when you're able to do that. I remember there was a similar story from a podcast I listened to from the Film Vault. I don't know what film it was. It was a Jim Carrey. I think it was I Love You, Philip Morris. It starts off with like a really like rough gay sex scene, and it was like on one of those like players where you can choose from a bunch of movies on the airplane. And he saw like this clearly didn't know what he was doing, like an older gentleman like flipping through movies. And he kind of just reluctantly pressed play on that, and the guy was just like, oh, he took pleasure because he knew what was coming. And sure enough, that scene opens, and the guy is just quickly, he's just trying to scramble to shut his player down. And it was just like a gift from the universe. You got to watch some like real-life comedy play out. It was...
If you ever want another one, a movie that I quite enjoy, but you should try to introduce people to Nocturnal Animals. I like that movie. Amy Adams, Jake Gyllenhaal. Very good.
I'm going to write that down.
But it opens with extreme slow motion close-up shots of old, fat, nude women hopping around in like band leader uniforms.
Oh my gosh!
But when I say uniforms, these are the remnants of uniforms. It's because it's Amy Adams' character runs an art gallery, so it's like a modern art exhibit. But it opens with no context, just these frankly unattractive women. I'm sure they're wonderful people. Waving sparklers and just various parts of them flapping around in extreme slow motion. It's like the Phantom camera style slow motion. You can really see, it's like watching the agony and the thrill and the agony or whatever. But
Connor, you're weaponizing the guy who peddles the movie Irreversible as a suggestion, right?
Oh,
You're just arming me with ammo here. This is bad.
This one is also pretty harrowing, actually. But I have refused to watch Irreversible, so. Presumably, it's not quite that bad. I'm not going to, Dan. You can't make me.
I have to add you to the list that Zane Simon's on. Actually, I'm trying to think of a bet I can make Zane for some time now to get him to watch that because he too has refused it. That's like the internet trolls. You can't say that. It's only going to make me come after you more. But if there's any way to segue from that, let's segue to number 4. Yeah, that's right, number 4, sir. As I mark the time for that. I'm trying to timestamp these better for the old YouTube audience. Did your YouTube people ask you for the old timestamps as well?
Sometimes. I can't be bothered.
I love that. Hey, see that, people? You see that? Be grateful. Be grateful. I'm just kidding.
That's my philosophy, kind of. Like, I love my listeners. I appreciate them. But also, like, my show is my show. So it's like, there's a certain amount of fuck the fans, is how I feel. Like, you enjoy this thing. You don't have a right to say what kind of thing it is. It's being given to you.
It's like F you money without the money.
Yeah, exactly. It's me. It's fuck you content.
Yes, exactly. I love that. I love it.
Me expressing my terrible personality. So allow me to do that, please.
All right, let's see if we can continue the non-crossover here at number 4. Because number 5, as expected, that was cool. We had 2 very polar different picks, but both again fitting athletic cheaters. So
yeah. All right, well, hopefully my next one is also a little unconventional, although I think people would celebrate this guy's athleticism. It's that it's contextual, and he also doesn't look like most of the athletes you think of. It's Fedor Emelianenko, athletic cheater.
Yeah.
One of the greatest athletic cheaters of all time. Or rather, it's supposed to be Fyodor, isn't it? We've been mispronouncing his name his entire career, and now we can't stop. Fedor was a small heavyweight. And, yeah, I mean, he was a small heavyweight who often fought extremely big heavyweights. Granted, they weren't very good, as most extremely big people are not good. You know, when you compliment the athleticism of like Travis Brown was celebrated for his athleticism.
Right.
He's like athletic for a guy that size.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You wouldn't look at him and be like, oh my God, this guy is like another species. He's just like hopping around. He's so agile. He's so quick. He's so powerful. He's just a guy that big shouldn't be able to move like that.
Oh, and real quick, no, and he was proportionate, which very few are. They're usually disproportionate at heavyweight. So the fact that you're proportionate makes you athletic too.
Right, but for a guy with that frame, he's not even as athletic as like Tyson Fury.
Sure, yeah, sure.
Who's also athletic for his size, but is also genuinely pretty athletic. All right, so my pick, Fedor, because Fedor was incredibly fast. By heavyweight standards, I don't think there's... I'm not sure if there's ever been a heavyweight just purely faster. On his feet and with his hands. Very, very quick. But what really stands out to me is... There's also the flexibility. There's the flexibility in his game, the ability to pick up new skills, to adapt to different opponents. Fedor fought a ton of different game plans, opponent-specific game plans over the course of his career. There is a lifetime of difference between the way he fought Big Nog the first time and the way he fought Mirko Cro Cop, which is one of my favorite fights of all time. He took a totally different tack. He's like, this is the way to beat this person, and he was able to do that. Most averagely gifted people do not have that amount of flexibility. They have to, as I put it once, I think I said, journeyman skill sets tend to grow like canyons, narrow but deep. But it's depth that they can rely on. The sort of broadness, the ability to do a little bit of everything, that's in the athlete's ball court. So, ball court? Am I talking about racquetball? I don't know what that metaphor is.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. But
now you got me thinking of balls, damn it. God damn it, Connor.
It's always on this show. It's really just a front, isn't it, to talk about race science and gay porn.
Well, listen, Agent Ben 10's already been hitting me about coming back on, so don't step on his topic, okay? But yes.
That's right. Well, I'm only into softcore gay porn, actually, or as I call it, MMA. So the thing that really stands out to me about Fedor, though, is what I was talking about before, the coordination, the balance. When you see Fedor tie up with people, you just see like an incredible ability to either throw somebody or not get thrown. You see the ability to be on one leg and suddenly shift direction so that his hips are denying the opponent the throw or taking them off balance. You see, overhook like reap throws that don't work, and then you end up with these crazy scrambles. And Fedor is like always ending up on top, always escaping. Granted, he did play guard, I think, a lot more than modern heavyweights would, but he didn't have to, and he was just a devil to scramble with, like just so difficult to outmaneuver, even with full-on body-to-body contact, and exactly the kind of exchanges where you would expect the guys who were just bigger to have the innate advantage. And Fedor would connect with these giant guys and then just run circles around them. So, yeah, I think Fedor is one of the most incredible athletes ever, to be honest. And certainly by heavyweight standards. And if you know heavy hands for athletic cheating, you also know how we feel about heavyweights.
Yeah, I like that because Fedor is one of those weird ones. Like, he could fit a lot of lists, and I totally agree with him being on this list, by the way. But it's funny because I don't think he's on my top 5 unassuming heroes in MMA list, Connor. But like, he could totally be like a top 5 unassuming hero, but you can also make the argument is an athletic cheater because you're right. There is no way he should have been able to been doing that at his portly frame, which you could make an argument for another heavyweight that's maybe not on my list, but could be worthy of being on this list. And heavyweight is one of those ones where it's both an obvious division for athletic cheaters because if you're just athletic, you're immediately cheating in that division. In many eras, by the way, including our current one. But it also is like a very unassuming one because it does produce the Fedors, right? Who, on one hand, could be, if we're doing top 5 dominant champs, you could certainly put a stretch on there, and no one would blink twice or argue with you too hard. But he also, fits the athletic cheaters because a name that I know is on someone's list. We'll get to it on listener mentions. But it's a name that I thought of, which was Kevin Randleman for athletic cheaters. But then I immediately think of his most stupid athletic moment is a highlight of him getting reversed. And who is he getting reversed by? Fedor. Yeah,
his most incredibly athletic moment is in a fight he loses to a schlubby-looking dude. Yeah, and I think Fedor had like a smaller weight sumo kind of build. Like he was pretty clearly athletic when you knew what to look for. He had like a strong man physique. Man had thick legs, had a very strong back. It's just that he had like a little softness around the middle because he didn't have to cut weight. But I think he was less schlubby than he appeared. But it just added to the joy of seeing him beat someone like Randleman, right? That he's like got a little hairy tummy going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you knew anything about Randleman, you knew that dude was an athletic freak.
Unbelievable.
And I like this too because it's an older pick that reaches back a little further, which I tried to do, but all mine ended up on honorable mentions. So the oldest one, I guess, probably like Carwin. Again, another heavyweight, a different organization. They never got to cross. But yeah, a complete different prototype, obviously, as well. But I love it, man. I love it. I don't think it's going to segue much to mine because even though Fedor was a small heavyweight, he was still a heavyweight. And we're going to jump down to maybe the lightest men's division or near it as he now fights at bantamweight. John Lineker.
Feel it. John Lineker. Wow.
Yeah.
Even literally up to the surname, Dan, I thought you were about to say John Dodson.
He does end up on someone's list, so we will talk about him if he doesn't end up on yours, it's another good name there. But I actually went with Lineker, and he beat. I know it was a split, right? But didn't he beat Dodson in that fight? That was like a 5-rounder in Oregon. Or something.
What an amazing fight that was! Yeah, he did. He beat Dodson. Yeah. Although that was one of those ones that it could have been a draw. It could have gone the other way. I don't think anyone would have complained.
That's how I remember it too. Good. Okay. Mm-hmm. But him is more, and you were kind of checkboxing this off the top, where he checkboxes like the durability, it is stupid. And the cheating, I'm sure he has a lot of his fence grabs and convenient ball shots to take a break, and we'll talk about those, I'm sure, with a lot of selections coming up because that exists even at championship levels, which I believe you specialized in, right? Some of the best fighters actually cheat. Was that you, Connor?
Oh yeah. I 100% believe that. Yeah. Everybody cheats. Why would you not?
So that feeds into this topic as well, right? And so shouts to you on that. That's great. I think you're the only person I've heard really kind of, and it makes so much sense, and the examples are all right there if anyone wants to get mad at that. There's so many examples, which we will talk about some on this show, by the way, folks. But back
we will. One of my picks will have a very notable example of actual, rule-bending cheating. So nice.
Well, John Lineker cheats definitely with the weight and as well because, he just, even at bantamweight, don't put it past him, folks, to step on the scale. I mean, this is a guy that just, literally, he bought a PlayStation with his per diem money for his UFC debut in one of my favorite flyweight fights against Luis Gaudino. That's what he did. Alex Davis shares a story that, he was begging for, cups of water at, the food court and stuff to eat because he spent his whole UFC per diem. He got so stoked and bought a PlayStation because he's so poor. He doesn't know. Yeah. My colleague John Morgan, I think before he fought, was it Altekit Oskalic or something, over in, Macau? My colleague John Morgan at MMA Junkie, he's there covering it, and he's like, yeah, I see this dude. I don't know if I think he actually might have made weight for that fight, but he is straight up, crushing pizzas by himself in the food court at, 2 a.m.
Do you consider that an athletic gift in and of itself?
I mean, for a guy like myself, where I had to kill myself to get to weight classes, to get to certain weight classes when I competed, whether it was grappling or MMA. I definitely have that radar where, like, there's an envy where if I see someone that can make weight and still be athletic, they can still look better, perform better than me, when I have to, like, fucking work hard months just to get a little inkling of a six-pack because I've got that BJ Penn, Cabbage Kahea thing going. It sucks, man. It sucks.
You just named two of the hottest fighters, so I don't know why that... You had a sort of unflattering tone, but those are two of the sexiest dudes in this sport.
Cabbage Patch Kids turn into fighters. Yeah, big heads. There we go.
It does give you this weird feeling, right? I guess seeing that. I don't know if people can tell, but I've actually never cut weight. But it must give you that feeling that, like, there's some kind of nuclear reactor inside this guy's body that is just consuming vast amounts of fuel and turning it into some athletic resource that I don't have. It's like when you hear about Michael Phelps or Manny Pacquiao eating 10,000 plus calories a day, and you're like, even if I were in incredibly good shape, I wouldn't have to do that. Why?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and not only does he not take it seriously and still show up on fight day, Connor, and to the audience, but, like, A, he has ridiculous power, which I think is a checkbox, but B, more so the durability. Like, when I write about this guy, I haven't written about him in a while, but I went back to look, Connor. Like, I remember using this example where I'm like, it's almost like he is smirking like he knows he can't be hurt, like he's Super Mario and he just acquired the Star of Invincibility. And, like, the soundtrack we're watching is a crazy fight, but in his head it's and he's just chasing his guys around the cage and he's trying to get them and corral, like, before his time runs out. Like, that is a John Lineker fight, you know, at his best, at least. Anyways, he makes my list.
I think you touched on something else that is a very, very important byproduct of athletic ability. Probably the most important element of fighting overall, or of any kind of performance or competition, which is just confidence. Right? Like, everybody can sing, for example. There's like maybe 0.01% of the human population is actually tone deaf. They can't tell the difference between different notes. But everyone can sing just as easy as they can talk. It's just that you're confident in your ability to talk. At least some people are. Some people find talking as difficult as singing because they're not confident. And I think that applies to everything. If it's public speaking, if it's fighting, if it's any kind of, stand-up comedy, any kind of performance or competition, just like believing in your own ability, and really, especially in fighting, believing in the opponent's inability to stop you, not worrying about what they're going to do, is huge. As Conor McGregor said famously earlier in his career, right? Which one of the truest things he ever said is that when you're trying to beat someone, you don't focus on what they do. Like, you maybe want to have some awareness of their game, and you maybe want to prepare specific tactics, but you think about what you're going to do to them. And one of my other favorite coaches, Rafael Cordero, that's his whole thing, is confidence. Like, he has spoken specifically about boosting confidence with his corner advice. He tries not to give negative advice, doesn't tell his fighters what not to do, more than he just focuses on, like, how can I be positive and give you a path to success? And athleticism does that whether you have a good coach or not. Because you can feel you're a superhuman. I don't think I would have thought of John Lineker, but definitely, like, the confidence born of his physical attributes, it can't be denied.
Yeah, and you can see it even when he was facing more experienced guys who thought he had it in the bag, like Ian McCall, who granted was on a downfall of his own, but you just saw the surprise in fighters, like, what the frick is going on here? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely a cheater. Yeah.
Damn you. All right, so this is what I predicted. I predicted we would steer clear of crossover, but I think the top three, this is where we're going to get into the territory, sir. Does your top three, is that one of the, is this where your list turns up even higher as well?
I think so. These are also, a lot of them, the guys who are both athletic and technical. So I guess, boy, it feels like a crime to put this man at number 3, right? This is where I start stressing out, like, thinking the rankings themselves matter.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm going to go ahead and say George St. Pierre.
Nice. No crossover so far, but I
Oh, okay, all right. So he's not even in your top 3.
He's written down here. He was really tough to make it. Tough to make the list. you explain why he's on your list, and I'll sign off where I sign off. And if I differ as far as why he ended up being off mine, I'll chime in. But go ahead and set up GSP.
Well, GSP is, of course, renowned for being a fantastic technician. I think people focus on that, and as a result, sort of underrepresent his athletic ability. Here's the one thing you need to know about GSP to know how athletic he is. This man's background was in, Kyokushin karate?
Yep.
GSP talked about deriving his sense of timing from that background, but if you've seen Kyokushin competition, it's not the karate you're thinking of. It's not like Lyoto Machida's Shotokan. It's not like we keep a distance, we're trying to time each other and create one destructive collision, one perfect counter. Kyokushin is actually very far from the one perfect punch philosophy of those kinds of karate. It is like a brutal attrition sport. Knockdown karate, they call that sort of form of competition. And I don't know if GSP did knockdown competition or what. But here's the thing. This guy comes from a karate background. What did every single wrestler he ever trained with say about his wrestling? They said, this dude is one of the best ever. He's phenomenal. This guy comes from, wrestling is the background for MMA still to this day. Or something comparable, some sort of wrestling art, I think is the best foundation. And GSP didn't have that foundation, and then he goes in there and out-wrestles Josh Koscheck, beats the, at that time, famous takedown defense of Thiago Alves.
Yep.
Name some others. I mean, GSP...
Well, even early... Josh Koscheck, I think, was a really, a coming out party, if you will. But even if you go back before that to Frank Trigg, I know Frank Trigg didn't age particularly well in Hall of Fame wise, but he was a legit top contender. He was the guy that produced Dana White's favorite fight, that gave Matt Hughes the run for the at that time, that was the guy. And I think what was Trigg? I don't have his stats, but he was, I believe, an Olympic alternate up until that, or at least a team member as far as that training goes. He was a higher world class esque wrestler, I believe. Don't quote me. But yes, and you see him again back to the Lineker comparison of just opponents looking like, what the f? I'm supposed to be the more experienced MMA fighter and a wrestler, and that's what I just got my ass kicked in. George St. Pierre was doing it early on in his career. It didn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. People remember the second Koscheck fight, for example. I mean, Matt Hughes is another obvious example. This dude came in as a young dude and purely out-wrestles Matt Hughes. It's not supposed to be possible.
Yeah.
Or Sean Shirk. Or, all of these guys. GSP's the guy who disproved BJ Penn's, incredibly natural takedown defense. Penn was the guy...
Sorry, I was just going to say that double. I replayed in my head that double that he hits on Sean Shirk, which is insane because if you imagine how short Shirk is, he drives under and does the flipping of the legs up in the air like Sean Shirk used to do to dudes, but George did it. It was crazy. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, that's fine. So I think you can see the athleticism in those actual exchanges, but also just the fact that he was able to pick those skills up so relatively late in life. And to a degree that he could outdo people who had been specializing in those skills their entire lives. And GSP definitely has, more than anyone else, the breadth of game that I talked about before. To a degree that there's actually quite a lot of depth in this wide spread, right? GSP has a phenomenally well-rounded jiu-jitsu game. He is not just an incredible athletic shot wrestler. He also has a vast skill set of wrestling skills in the clinch and on the mat. I'd probably say the shallowest part of his game is maybe his striking. At least coming from my boxing perspective, GSP still can't throw a 1-2. But even that sort of demonstrates, just with having his innate timing and speed, that he was able to completely shut people down with just his jab.
Yeah.
In so many fights. So yeah, to me, GSP is one of the most technically proficient fighters ever, one of the smartest fighters ever, but also clearly one of the greatest athletes of all time.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't disagree with any of that. I guess I just maybe left him off the list is because he was just also so technical, and in comparison to a lot of people on these lists, or put, regardless of the aging or who was doing the strategy or the aging of the camp strategy or whatnot, that was clearly an edge and an emphasis, right? You can't deny that. Even up until his last random performance against Bisping. You know, there was a lot of strategy and as far as attacking the bad eye, etc., like that. So maybe that was what edged it out. And there's another fighter who I won't mention because he'll probably end up on this list because he fits a similar things that we can say, both, you know, pro and con or whatever. But I'm also leaving him off the list as well because I'm almost positive he will be on your list, and you're much more better suited to talk about him. So
can I add one more thing actually about GSP?
Yeah,
it's just an interesting sort of inversion of something we said before. We talked with John Lineker about these innate physical attributes breeding confidence. GSP was so athletic, he didn't have to be confident. He's sort of famously unconfident in a lot of his fights. And it being such an important thing for fighters, he was able to rely on skill and the mentorship of Firas Zahabi. That's one of those perfect coach-athlete pairings. But also just like he could, to a degree, just kind of feel it out and figure it out as he went along.
Nobody else... Oh, sorry, go ahead. No.
No, please, that's all.
I was just going to say, that hammers your point home, really. Like, that actually, your previous point, that pretty much hammers it home to where you don't need confidence when you have athleticism to that degree of cheating.
Yeah. Tyrone Woodley is another great example. Like, I think Tyrone Woodley is quite an insecure, not particularly confident guy. And yet, look at how far he was able to go, just sort of putting a bunch of Band-Aids over himself with that athleticism, just sort of covering for it.
He's going to need a lot more Band-Aids, though, huh?
Need I'm not sure if they make one that's like this shape.
Oh my God.
But if they do, he should invest.
The ever-giving content of fountain of content that is MMA. The ever-giving. Yeah. Oh man. I guess I'll add on the GSP note too. Is that like this was also the moment, like just to speak on his freakish athleticism. Like this is the moment that you should have known that BJ Penn was really going to get his ass kicked. Before the second rematch was not because he said to the death, because we know that. And by the way, we should see more corner stoppages, but we know how that ended, right? But if you were really listening to him, there was this moment I remember in one of the countdowns where he was like, he was trying to talk shit about George, but it just came off as jealousy. But again, it's a jealousy that I'd be lying if I said I didn't understand. And he goes, "Oh, this fucker eats cheeseburgers and he's got 6-packs." And it was right there. You should have known in hindsight. That's when he was defeated. That's when BJ knew. There was no chance he was winning that rematch.
Yeah.
The first fight was the closest you'd ever get.
That's not a trash talk. It's rationalization. You know, he's already telling himself, this isn't fair. It's not fair what this guy's about to do to me.
He was going through food withdrawals, let's be fair. I mean, BJ and food was like a lifetime smoker being away from their cigarettes, you know? He's probably just cranky, like, that motherfucker, he still look good.
I wouldn't know anything about food or smoking, but I'm a better man than BJ Penn. All right, I'll stick by that.
Yeah,
I should have picked him just to like trash talk him.
If you hang out by the lava shack long enough, you can prove that you're a better man. Apparently.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. This is why I used to be a BJ Penn fan, but he is banned from my list. By the way, on these lists for me for obvious reasons.
He's always been he's a spoiled rich kid. He's annoying.
Yeah. We got number. Who's it? What number are we on now? 3 still,
2.
right? 2.
Oh, you're 3. That's right.
That's right. GSP was a good one. I thought we were gonna have crossover. We probably will with my 3. I'm guessing. This was probably one of the more obvious picks, and maybe that's why he falls right in the middle for athletic cheaters. Yoel Romero, the Cuban muscle crisis there for shouts to the co-main event podcast. Is there crossover, Connor?
Yeah. What do I do if that's my number 1?
That's your number. Oh, jeez. Well, I apologize for sinking your battleship.
I can swap out my number 2 since the order is arbitrary anyway.
We'll just adjust your list. We'll note that it's your number 1. I'll set it up, and you spike it down like it's a volleyball match. Sound good? I'll set up the pick here, and you spike it on home because it's your number 1. Sound good?
If I were Yoel Romero, it would be very easy to spike that down, even if I'd never done it before. But yes, take it away.
You can do it with any of your 5 or 6 appendages, depending on how you look at it. Yes,
that's right. Goro combat over here.
I mean, geez, yeah, Yoel Romero. I mean, obviously, an athletic freak. Like, not only does like confidence matter, like I don't think age matters. Like, nothing really matters to this guy. Like, I feel like he doesn't even know. Everyone's like, oh, how old is he? Like, the funny thing is, like, why don't y'all ask Yoel Romero? Because I don't think he knows. Like, I think if you were to ask Yoel, but I don't know what you're talking, he would do the thing like when he gets caught like grabbing a fence or hanging out in the corner too long. He just go, I don't know what you're talking about, Daniel. No. And he wouldn't call me Daniel, by the way. He's the kind of dude who probably just call me Chinito the whole time, you know? Be like, no matter how many times he's telling, like, no, Yoel, my name's Dan. Okay, Chinito. Ways.
What's that's a very good UL, by the way. What's Chinito? I'm guessing that is it sounds like Chino.
Yeah, it's like it's a form of.
Oh, it's little Chino. It's
Chinese guy. It's an endearing term for Chinese guy. We'll just say that. I was called that a bunch on construction sites, and I could totally see Yoel just.
The day I found out that Marcos Maidanda's nickname was Chino because he has narrow eyes, I was like, I've heard so many Chinos, I never knew that's what it meant.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a great UL. Now, my theory has been, in part because he has the voice of a man who is definitely more than like 42.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I think he's approximately 9.5 thousand years old. I think when the walls of Jericho came crumbling down, Yoel Romero emerged from the earth. He's an ancient Babylonian demon god. Who just defies the laws of physics. That's why he was going to be my number one, because, like, nobody can do the things Yoel Romero does. Yoel Romero also incredibly adaptable. Like, his fight with Paulo Costa was a totally different Yoel Romero performance than we'd ever seen. Suddenly, he's like this relaxed, jabbing, counter-punching pocket boxer. He never had those skills before. It's like he just suddenly realized, oh, I might need those for this fight. Sorry, my Yoel's not as good as yours. and he just like becomes a different fighter. And he has done that numerous times throughout his career, just become a different style of fighter. This was a guy who was like one of the best wrestlers ever, who arguably had could never quite make it in elite competition. But I think that was often more of a mental thing, because like clearly physically, Yoel Romero is insane. But this is a guy who was so otherworldly confident, so comfortable, and so willing to think that he could just figure it out as he went, that he just didn't wrestle for the first, 10 fights of his career? The story is essentially that he stopped even training it. He was like, I don't want to do that wrestling stuff anymore. I'm going to start knocking people out. And that's all he did. What the hell? He was already 36 years old or something like that. It's not fair. It's not fair.
Yeah, like, I guess his brother was a boxer, so I'm still sketchy on those notes. I'm sure you're more familiar with that.
His brother is a boxer, yeah. I have to actually double-check. I'd have to double-check to find his name. He's not quite as prominent, but it's also harder.
Allegedly, his brother.
Oh, is that a...
I don't know. No, I don't know. It just, everything seems allegedly with Yoel, right?
That's true, yeah. He's an enigma.
He's an enigma. Yes, he is. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yeah, a lot of great notes there, and I hate picking a gift to go along with the tweet out, because it always kind of burns the top. But it was too obvious not to go with a picture of Yoel with his like ridiculous takedown defense where he springboards up like a aforementioned Super Mario character for that reference. Like. The insane stuff that he is able to do just really doesn't make sense. You got to have him somewhere on this list.
Obviously, some of that is the wrestling skill set. I mean, that helps in those particular moments, which is the only reason I emphasize like the striking stuff. But even then, like Darren Elkins isn't wrestling like that. Darren Elkins is a good wrestler. He's got a wealth of wrestling experience. He's not wrestling like that.
I appreciate the Yoel comment, but I will say. Connor's got a really good Australian accent, people, for those unaware, so he does a good... not that there's an opportunity to do it here, but, you know.
You're just saying it hoping either Zane or Phil were listening and groan when I say, hello? That's the only word I ever do.
See, Yoel's not Australian, but maybe you could be like one of the people in Australia when he missed weight to fight Luke Rockhold, and you're asking him if he's all right.
You know what? I'm going to. I just thought of another person that ties into Romero, so I'm gonna swap Romero out. He's no longer my number one. For no reason other than I have a new good example to talk about.
Okay, in that sense, because I'm afraid to burn another one, but it was 2-1, and I was gonna have to go next. So, do you want to give me your actual number 2? I'll give you a number 2
Sure.
if you have a new number 1. Does that make sense?
I do,
Does that make sense?
Should I get my number 2? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I still have 2 to go, and if you're gonna insert another one, then I would rather have you go first because I don't want to I don't want to sink another battleship with this next one.
That's fine. All right. Well, my number 2 is an obvious pick, really, just because I'll take any excuse to talk about him. It's Jose Aldo.
Nice, good. I'm glad
Jose
you made
Aldo.
it.
Absolutely. Is there crossover there? We have crossover.
No. That's the one I said I left off on purpose, hoping knowing you would put on. So good.
That was an easy give, right? You knew I would bring him up if I had the opportunity, and this is an obvious opportunity to talk about it because if we were doing top 5 technicians or top 5 athletes, Jose Aldo would be on there for me. It very much in the GSP category. Just as well-rounded, I think, although much more narrow in what he actually liked to do to people. Whereas GSP was way more willing to be flexible. Maybe that comes down to Jose Aldo being naturally more confident than GSP. He knows what he's good at, and he's going to force people into his game. Rather than sort of like trick them into his game like GSP often seemed to do. So Aldo's just a freak. Like, Aldo is also... he doesn't benefit from the fact that, like, Romero has not taken a bunch of punches throughout his pre-MMA career. Although, granted, there are plenty of concussions in wrestling. But I think we all know it by now. It's what we suspect strongly. It's the accumulation of damage that causes a lot of CTE and eventual durability issues and things like that. And Jose Aldo has certainly had more of that than Yoel. He's had a long career. And yet, in much the same way as Yoel, his prime hasn't ended the way primes are supposed to end. You know what I mean? There's supposed to be a falling off point for a human MMA fighter, where suddenly something gives and it's like systems collapse. The whole network, it's just this really fragile sort of web of skills and attributes. And when one thing goes, usually the whole thing starts to crumble. Jose Aldo is like, he still looks amazing. That fight with Peter Yan, Peter Yan is... let me put it this way. I've celebrated GSP. There's a reason he's like my number 1 pound for pound of all time. And it's that he is one of the only champions to successfully face and hold back representatives of 3 distinct generations of contenders. He outlived his time. Most people, they sort of slot right into a generation and they become irrelevant when their generation becomes irrelevant. And GSP just kept holding back new waves, like new sort of metagame ideas of how to solve his style. Jose Aldo didn't quite get that because Max Holloway and Conor McGregor both beat him. But now that he's no longer champion, Peter Yan, if that's not 4th generation MMA, what is? He is so much the post-Max Holloway MMA metagame. And Jose Aldo went in there and fought one of the best looking fights of his entire career. Didn't win it, but he's still in there making Peter Yan fight tooth and nail. After losing his championship, after moving down a weight class, after a lifetime of struggling with weight cuts, the guy makes the idiotic decision to move down to 135, and he's still a top contender, clearly one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world. How do you do that?
Yeah, I love that you're really using that as an example, because for me that was, even though he didn't make my list, because only by default, by the way, I knew you were going to put him on here, but it's that post-Prime Aldo that really sold it to me. I remember being there at UFC 200, to where that's the first time you see Aldo, at least visually, just on his face, looks older. You see his balding, he has a mustache that he made him look like he aged overnight, but if you looked at his body, you were like, wow, he looks like he's in shape. Then the next night is the fight with Edgar, and I may have picked Edgar neither here nor there, but let's just say I bet you, without looking, the projected odds were probably tighter than how the match played out, because it was just some of the best. And I know you rant and rave, and I've used it as well, and as well as Patrick Wadman. Shouts to him. That was a fight you guys have pointed to when just showing some of his amazing defense, right? That apply in stupid ways that they don't make sense, and it was like, wow. And he would go and lose to Max Holloway in the next fight, and I picked that, but only because of the stylistic thing. It wasn't because Aldo was done, which he would later prove for people that were saying that he was done in matches even before the Jan one, when he fought Moicano or Stevens. I believe I actually might have even picked Stevens in that fight. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was dead wrong there. Like, and he comes out there and he's Jose Aldo of old. He's like, oh, you thought, narrative of me not kicking for, like, the better part of a decade? Let me just bring that back now. It's crazy.
I'm just going to get over these, what seem to be endemic problems. I'm just going to decide to get over them. Because that's the thing people are supposed to be able to do, is just, like, because clearly there was, like, some deep-seated insecurity about the low kicks that, like, you could see the pattern of when they started to vanish from his game, that people just started countering them, and he was such a defensively minded fighter. The longer he was champion, I think it was probably a great deal of pressure on him. It was very much like they can't have what's mine. I think that was his mindset. Some might call that fighting not to lose. But when you fight not to lose successfully for a decade, it's pretty damn impressive. And Aldo, I don't know, he just like is like, you know what? I guess I should bring the low kicks back. He just gets over what was, like, I think a real, like, anxiety-induced lack in his game and just brings him back. I don't know how he does that. The main thing, though, just like GSP, Aldo does not have a wrestling background.
No.
Aldo's maybe, now you don't see it, like, offensively ever, and maybe that part of his game is shallow, but from the narrow slice of his wrestling that we get to see, you would have a strong argument that he's, like, one of the best wrestlers ever in MMA.
Sure.
His takedown defense is unbelievable. I know Renan Barão's statistics, I think, are slightly higher. It doesn't matter. Jose Aldo fought incredible wrestlers. Do you remember the work of former Bloody Elbow contributor Mike Reardon, Coach Mike?
That sounds That sounds really familiar. Yes.
Yeah, he hasn't written for us for a while, but I used to love Coach Mike's. He used to do a series called The Fact Grinder, and he did, like, wrestling history breakdowns.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, Ed Gallo now does fantastic wrestling coverage that's similar in some ways. But Mike did, like, a breakdown of, for example, Yoel Romero's whole amateur wrestling career. And actually, he was a professional wrestler, too, weirdly. Not like a WWE, but he got paid in Germany to do, like, scholastic-style wrestling, freestyle wrestling. Anyway, Coach Mike, this has stuck with me forever because he knows wrestling really, really well. He is an actual coach. He does really good analysis. He really understands the competition side as well as the technical side. And I still remember him saying, with, like, this, just the emphasis of utter amazement, Jose Aldo beat Chad Mendes in pure wrestling exchanges. He didn't, because there's a lot of ways in MMA that you can sort of cheat specialists, right? Like, maybe I'm not as good at breaking down posts to stay on top of you as you are at getting up. But if I can punch you in the face, if I can go outside the lines of what is actually wrestling, then I can make my wrestling appear more effective. You can always compensate by bleeding into other phases. Jose Aldo just straight up out-wrestled Chad Mendes, who could easily be on this list.
Yes, yeah.
One of the greatest athletes in MMA history, and also one of the most credentialed and impressive wrestlers we've ever seen in this sport as well. And 2 times, I mean, Chad Mendes had the benefit of losing to learn from his mistakes. But in the first fight, all he had was his wrestling, and he went so hard to try to get Aldo down. Not even a chance. And on the subject of cheating, actual cheating, that's a famous example too.
Yeah.
Mendes fight.
Oh yeah, totally. First Mendes fight, and then even parts of the second Mendes fight. Like, I remember rooting. I was rooting so hard for Mendes, Connor. You would have thought that I was Ed Gallo. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was rooting that hard. I was standing that hard from shouts to Ed, and obviously Chad, you're right, could be on this list. But like, I can't remember what it was, but I remember, like, toward the end of the round, like, I think Aldo took some time. He's like, oh, yeah, I did that classic. Like, oh, I think that was a foul. Hold on. Give me a second. And then what? I don't understand. I think he did that. I don't understand. Like, you understand what he's saying, you son of a. And, and again, not to target out somebody who, speaks a different language or anything like that. But it was a convenient excuse for a lot of the people on these lists to suddenly forget how to speak the language that was agreed upon, and forget that like Herb was just explaining you these rules in the rules meeting like before you went out there. Like he knows what you understand and don't, but they're out there going what? Huh? As they walk away, or they don't. They deny ref eye contact with the ref's trying to run protocol and assess, and the fighter will get fouled and they'll immediately run away just to give themselves more time. You know that move, Connor, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah, it's all gamesmanship, man. It's all part of it. You wouldn't like. Everybody talks about MMA being all of these people who complain about cheating are also the people who talk about it being a simulated death match.
Yes.
What would you do in a death match but cheat? You would do absolutely everything to win.
Absolutely.
If it's supposed to be a simulation of your life being on the line, then I get it. But here's the thing. Jose Aldo is so athletic. Like, the takedown that he stopped with that fence grab, it was hit 10 seconds later. Mendes got him off his feet. He'd already been warned, so he didn't reach for the fence again. Guess what happened? He popped right back up to his feet, because that's what always happens. Whenever anyone completes a takedown, they never control him.
Wasn't that the time where he does the hip thing too, where like you see him like hip bridging, like it's a drill, like it's one of those drills you do in the beginning of jiu-jitsu class, where you're like, okay,
it's that.
But he's doing it in an actual fight, and against Mendes, who again I think people should forgive us. Similarly, why they should forgive us for Randleman or your fate over Randleman is because when their contemporaries meet head to head, and the other guy clearly wins, then we know who the better athlete is, or and not discrediting Mendes, but. Just saying that.
No, or at least they've channeled their athleticism better, I guess.
Or there we go, more effective, or at least like rankings, right? They say rankings are tough. When one guy holds a head-to-head battle over the other one, that'll give him the extra bump. Okay, that makes sense, and that's kind of the logic I think we went with a lot of these.
Yeah. I think that's just the logic of competition in general. You got to do that. But he get that whizzer and then just bumping the hips back and forth. Chad Mendes knows that move.
Yep. Stop it.
He's expecting it to happen. Couldn't stop it.
All right, on that note, as I, again, timestamp in there for myself and the audience, right? It's number 2 time for me, and I was worried I was going to sink your battleship, and I'm trying to be all courteous, but really, I think we're going to get out of here okay, because, it depends, Connor. You tell me. Is durability, power, all those things, athleticism, but someone's length of frame doesn't really make them athletic, does it?
Yeah, I mean, it's wishy-washy, because I think you could argue whether or not durability is like athleticism as we generally use the term.
Right.
There are guys that we don't consider athletic who are very durable.
Very true, very true. It is how you use it.
I don't think Carlos Condit was a great athlete, so to speak. I think he was a little cumbersome, a little ungainly, a little awkward. Not super fast, not super powerful, but goddamn, the man had probably arguably the best chin ever.
Yeah, his durability and length really helped him there. And this guy's...
You could call it. You could call any physical attribute athleticism if you want. Make the case.
Well, I'll call it... how about this? He's got athleticism, although I believe that's fading, my number 2. But his length, I would say, exists more on cheating. Although he's yet to compete in heavyweight, he is still close into that North Division where having certain skills already sets you apart. Having certain athleticism, like his football player brothers, that is John Jones for my number 2, of course, sets him apart. I would argue that length is cheating, not just because it is so long in such a ignorant sport time where he came up in such a shallower division with aging legends at the time. Not to play that revisionist history game, but follow me for a second. But also because he used that length to cheat, to poke in the eyes, something that there's a massive sample size of, including him, on a documentary called The Hurt Business, even admitting that he does it in purposely full to cheat. Like, John Jones has no problem admitting it. And I like that John Jones. At least he's being honest.
That's everyone's favorite John Jones, because everyone knows John Jones he's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So the John Jones who's just like, yeah, I'm a bad dude. Yeah, I just want to win. I don't care about other people. Let me ask you this. So if chin and reach count, does sociopathy count as athleticism?
Yeah, because because it is, because you already have like God-given gifts of like length. You have athleticism. You have a big camp getting behind you. You have Dana White giving you the treatment that he used to do to Rampage and other guys when they got in illegal troubles. You got the whole cleanup crew trying to keep your image clean. Like, you have everything available to you that so many people don't. And it wasn't just, working hard. That was another thing with the GSP thing on why he's an athlete. Because, GSP wasn't the only guy, folks, that was independently skills training. Even back then. Newsflash, a lot of guys worked hard. Newsflash, a lot of guys skill trained. It didn't make the difference. Sorry to tell you that. But, Jones had all these things, the intangibles and the on-paper stuff. But yet the fact that he still felt the need to cheat even got people like me, it dug up the old purist in me, Connor, where I was like, that is just cheat, man. this guy's just cheating.
Right. I'm the guy who loves cheating, and I'm like, come on, John.
Do you need to be kicking their knees out and destroying their ACLs? You could beat them and retain your title without ruining their career or vision. You know that, right? Just saying.
Just be subtle. At least Jose did that. He did that one fence grab in that one fight. It was his only cheat. He made it count. He picked his moment. He made it count. John Jones is just out here cheating willy-nilly.
So let me ask you a question that I probably already know the answer to, but maybe it's my excuse to get on someone, which I really hate to do because the officials don't get enough credit. But who do you get more mad at now when John Jones pokes an eye? Him pretending, even though there's all this footage, including his own actual admissions, pretending to go, oh yeah, oh what, like this? You want this? Or Herb Dean, I'm guessing genuinely explaining the rules because who knows where Herb Dean's fucking head is at? You don't realize this is the guy that's requested you for a reason, Herb, because you're lax on this shit.
I think Herb half the time is he's so very indecisive that when he's supposed to be deliberating on the eye poke, he's like, should I have worn these shoes? Yes. I don't know. I don't know if this was the right call. That man never feels good about a decision he makes.
No.
Yeah, I guess you could be more mad at the referees. It feels like giving a bit of a pass to John.
I'm just blown away by this, Connor. How is, and I said this before the Reyes fight, and I'm not trying to be that person or crybaby or cry foul, but if you're again, you want to exercise all means possible to win, especially if you're fighting a guy like Jones for a title. How is a coach not gone to a commission ahead of time and been like, it's not that hard to do, and you'll have the stats will be on your side, by the way. You just tally up all the times that he's eye poked just within the UFC and tally up the times that he's gotten reprimanded for it. Then you remind him that the warning, by the way, folks, actually technically happens in the locker room. That is technically the warning. So points actually, if a ref, you're like, oh, wow, this ref's not playing around tonight. No, that's actually the ref going by what they should be doing. They should be taking points right away, whether you like it or not, folks. Yeah. That's actually in the rules. I don't know how no one has just stated that and then add to the layers this is... But the reason why I'm showing you this is because we really don't want Herb Dean in there. Because say what you will, whether you like John McCarthy or not, John McCarthy was honest. He's like, John specifically asked me not to be in there because I call him on his shit. And you got to agree with Big John whether you like him or not. That's very easy to believe.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I don't know. But yeah, I don't know how someone hasn't made that argument to be like, don't give us Herb, and whoever you give us, they are taking a point on the first eye poke.
Well, maybe they have. You certainly hear about those discussions from boxers. You hear a lot more about the negotiations around fight contracts and the various stipulations, we want to have the hand wrapping has to be done in front of us. It's pretty standard in boxing the fighters have to inspect each other's gloves, or their camps get to inspect each other's gloves.
Yeah.
And all these things. And they also will quibble frequently about weight class rules, about rehydration rules, and about who gets to ref the fight. And I think that's because boxers, there are a million boxers who have no leverage whatsoever, that are the vast majority of boxers are just as shit out of luck as the majority of MMA fighters. But you hear about it more because the big deal boxers do have a lot of leverage. As far as employees go of the promotions, they have way more leverage than even, I think, anyone other than Conor McGregor has in the MMA world. And so I just think maybe it does happen, and we just don't know that fighters don't have any sway over who refs their fight, that the commissions and the promotions are just shut up, you get who you get.
Well, Connor, the Diaz brothers were smart enough with all their boxing savvy to negotiate someone watching the hand wrappings. However, because they were the Diaz brothers, they chose that person to be Jake Shields. Remember that?
Yeah, that was great.
Did you share this opinion of Jake Shields, by the way? And I actually don't like the tweeting thing now because it's taking away this illusion I had of Jake Shields, which was, and you can go back and watch any tape. You can watch, I think even Grabaka Hitman signed off on it when he saw him there just as an attendance to a fight. But Jake Shields, no matter what the situation, he looks like he's perpetually lost.
Yeah,
always.
He looks confused, sort of like scared,
Yes.
a little scared, like he's like bewildered. He doesn't know where his mom went. Jake Shields says, I know he's like an ass and he has dumb politics and everything, but he's still a hero of mine because you want to talk about people who went way farther than they should have despite lacking athletic ability.
Well, I have a theory on that, and I'm trying to clean up my wordage to not be so of the 90s era that I grew up, so I try not to use certain things like the R word. But let's just say I think that he gets his strength from special places. Let's just say I've talked about Team Spectrum before with Ben from the Fight Site, and Jake Shields would be on that team. I would nominate him, let's just say. He seems like there's something special about him that's a bit off, but he makes it work. You know what I'm saying? Like he draws strength from it. I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I'm going to shut up.
You're talking about. I didn't realize that we weren't allowed to say radical anymore. That's the R word I was saying in the 90s. I think Jake Shields is pretty radical.
Me too, especially since he's training more at Extreme Couture, and I don't need to show up there after this pandemic and him go, Team Spectrum, huh? I was like, oh shit!
What is Jake Shields, by the way? Who's he threatening with this gesture?
I don't know. It was very, maybe very 90s. That's even like 80s. That's very like confrontation.
Yeah, I'm just saying Jake Shields is the last guy that I would be threatened by him doing this. I don't think he could even hurt his other hand. And
besides, he's got that like Hendo, like wooden inside leg kick wind up before he throws any punches anyway. So you got to tell there's a tell there. Mm-hmm. Start running before he gets his hands on you.
Yeah, the king of the BAP.
So good. But wow, this is where I get myself off track. But yeah, John Jones, I put out because again, it's just so hard not to. It felt like you were just even as a fan, it felt like all my insecurities of childhood were just creeping up, and I was just like, get the bully, just get him. It's not fair.
Yeah, that was the most crushing thing too. It's something about it, man. I've fallen out of love with DC a little bit. More exposure to him and his own views and beliefs, and certainly him. Speaking of eye pokes, him crying about Stipe eye poking him was one of the funniest things I've ever heard. But I had so much sympathy for DC when he fought John Jones because you know what John Jones did when he won that fight the first time? I'm going to show you the gesture right now.
Yeah.
That one. This man is literally, he is a sociopath in Arrested Development. He's a 13-year-old forever. That's his immediate instinct for this old, distinguished veteran of multiple combat sports, this Olympian, was to do the Crash Bandicoot suck-it crotch chop.
After he arguably did the most insulting thing you could do to a guy like DC, which was take him down and then deny him takedowns. As if that wasn't like already the twisting of the heart, to a wrestler like that.
I don't know if you ever watched Louis before Louis C.K. got canceled, but there's an episode where he just gets beaten up by some teenagers in front of a date.
Yes.
And that's what I know Daniel Cormier had that exact feeling.
Oh, that's a good reference.
This immature little shit. Just take me to school.
And by the way, that freeze frame on the DX Suck-It, I picture that. And the other thing that comes into frame all the time, which again, previous point proving it right of yours, Connor, a very confused Herb Dean. So confused. He's like, am I calling this fight? Is this fight over? What's going on?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, Jones is another interesting choice, though. Like John Lineker, I don't know. Because I usually, when I'm saying athleticism, like I said, it's the explosiveness, the timing, these Yoel Romero type stuff.
And you talk about your previous point. And you talk about your previous point of not wanting to change, right? That could be John Jones of reluctancy of going to heavyweight, and back to the DC and eye poke point. Maybe that's why now he's going. He's like, wait a minute, the two best guys are the titles being decided by eye pokes up there. I think now's the time.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a lot of those other athletic things. He's not. I mean, you've seen him try to dunk a basketball.
No, yeah.
He looks like a star basketball player. He has the perfect build, and he can't do it. He's not athletic in the way. Who's the best of his two brothers?
Yeah,
Chandler?
Yeah, and I bet you they're much more confident than he is too. I feel like it's a really false confidence, which is probably why so many of us were suspect of Jones even before he kind of divulged who he was. And it reminds me, maybe because I watched the Tiger Woods doc, but he reminds me of like a Tiger Woods character where you have all this skill and drive clearly, but there's this clear insecurity of not being sure you belong that probably comes out when you're with the boys.
I have to wonder, I strongly suspect his brothers developed their confidence on a young John Jones.
Yeah, beating the crap out of him, that's for dang sure.
Probably. But certainly like Chandler, I think it's Chandler Jones, he is like, when I talk about capital A athleticism, he has it. He's big, but he's way too fast. He's super strong. All these things. Jones doesn't have like that insane agility or ability to like leap around and shock people with speed, but physical attributes are so clearly like the foundation of what he does. He has an amazing chin. He's incredibly confident. Even when he's been like completely surprised by an opponent outperforming his expectations, which has happened several times, he's still insanely confident. And of course, the reach.
Very true.
It wouldn't be John Jones without the reach.
Yep, it insulates a lot. All right, so is your improvised number one the same as mine? Excuse me, my number one. I guess that's the question now, right?
It would be interesting if I talked myself into it. It would be kind of cool if we didn't have any crossover. I mean, we technically did, but
it would be. But let's see. It is your turn, so let's see what you got for number one. See if you can sink the battleship, or if we go different ways.
All right. Well, it was going to be Yoel.
Okay.
I decided instead to slot in somebody who fought Yoel famously 2 times. It's Robert Whitaker.
Wow. Okay. I like
Whitaker,
this.
As a welterweight, Robert Whitaker was just celebrated for technique. He came in and it's, you know what I mean? Like he comes in with this low guard, this relaxed looking boxing style. He's beating people with his jab, with counter punches. You're like, oh, this guy's a technician. And then you see what happens when he like stops restricting his body from doing what it wants to do, growing in the way it wants to grow. He blew up so naturally when he went to 185. Like he went from, I don't know, probably being forced to be around like 190, 195, maybe to make 170, to like a comfortable 220 instantly. But much like GSP, Robert Whitaker picked up wrestling really, really quickly. We talked about Yoel Romero cheating his way through wrestling exchanges with his otherworldly athleticism. Robert Whitaker beat him in wrestling. Like, again, in a Jose Aldo way, maybe it's easier to defend than it is to make something happen against concerted resistance, but even so, that's Yoel Romero. He's supposed to be able to out-wrestle you. And in neither of their 2 fights was he actually able to out-wrestle Robert. They got him down in the first one, but it didn't even get him down for a whole round, couldn't do anything when he was down there, and the vast majority of their wrestling exchanges were Whitaker just... This is a guy who just picked up wrestling, started competing in it as a specialty a year before, and he's just scrambling like a maniac. So I think Robert Whitaker is an underappreciated super athlete for sure.
You know, and you already did the groundwork for this pick because we hashed out GSP, who is a very similar crossover archetype within this context. And in the wrestling context, the crazier part about the Yoel thing is you don't just have 1 fight. You have 2 fights, so any excuses of, well, maybe he was having an off day. It was 2 fights, and if anyone was having an off day, the first fight, he had the busted leg early from the first round, so he was doing it on 1 good leg. And the second fight, he was doing it half-conscious because most of the wrestling happened after he was rocked or something in that slew maelstrom and toward the later rounds. So he was tired, deep into fights, and half-conscious, and still fending off wrestling, which is pretty bananas to think about.
This is a guy who had just started doing wrestling specialist training to the degree that he was competing in the Australian, amateur wrestling circuit. And by the way, this is the Australian amateur wrestling circuit. No shade to our friends from down under, but not exactly known for their wrestling. It's a kickboxing and boxing country, and yet, he's in there with the way you put it. I like instinctively. Not even thinking clearly, instinctively, he has already gotten it into his muscle memory, or he just has a natural feel for these exchanges that half-conscious, he's just not letting Yoel Romero out-wrestle him. There's that one scramble in their second fight where Romero gets in, he shoots and then spins to like a tight waist, like a rear waist cinch.
Yeah.
And they're just twirling around each other like there's, I don't know, 2 planetary bodies, narrowly missing. it's like a 30-second wrestling exchange with both guys just adapting on the fly to each other, and it's neutral because Yoel can't out-wrestle it.
Yeah, there's a drill we would do in wrestling that was kind of similar, where someone would be like almost like in a 4-point, and you were balancing your stomach over, and you work on spinning around your target like that, and you would take turns, and you'd almost get yourself really dizzy, but they were like flowing off it in a way that you could not improvise nor really plan out. Like, it was just there. It was beautiful.
Yeah. So I think, not wouldn't be my first choice, but I think he's a very worthy pick, and is clearly a freak.
Dude, I'm surprised my number one has stayed intact, unmolested this whole time somehow.
I feel it. Is it another heavyweight?
No, man, it's the complete opposite of the spectrum.
Okay, let's hear it.
That's right. Cue the Mission Impossible music if that gives it any cue, because this guy, felt like Mission Impossible sneaking through this list and not getting hit. I feel like even though it is 125 pounds, he packs in both athleticism and cheater in a perfect blend. That is Davison Figueiredo, Dice Duguera, the God of War. And
I didn't even think of Figueiredo, even though I call him Flyweight Romero.
Yes,
Romero was
yes.
my number one.
You guys, I believe, are the ones who originate that comparison. Yes, and I totally he. And by the way, late entry because he uses his clout to get his brother in, which doesn't factor in the athletic cheater. That's just a thing you do in the industry, right? But late entry when Francisco Figueiredo, hashtag Figgy Stalls, whoever came up with that one on Twitter, you hear, I don't know if you watched this fight or heard the commentary, but DC is like and I know DC rubs people the wrong way, especially on commentary, but it's very endearing. Like, he's really like doing the DC like giggle, like in the way where it's not not the one that he abuses for every answer, but like it was one of those really genuine giggles. And he goes to explain it to himself. He goes, "Look at Davison. He's acting like he's lost. Like, Davison Figueiredo was acting like he was lost as a cornerman, just to stall to give his brother more breathing room. Like, such an obvious tactic. Like, not ripping an ice bag, but like actively just standing and looking around and ignoring the official just to break more time.
Yeah.
And DC is going, and it sounds like an assumption, but DC explains, he goes, no, Davison specifically told us in this week's fighter meetings that his brother has a gas tank that he's worried about, and that's his only worry. Look at him. He's distracting the officials to buy him more time, and he's saying it right on air. It's great. It's great.
That also bespeaks the confidence of a true athlete cheater, because he's just doing it in the open. It's like, we didn't even mention Yoel Romero's actual rule-breaking cheating for your number 3 pick, but that's the other reason he's Flyweight Romero. These guys just blatantly cheat. They don't care. What are you going to do? It's like I think they have the feeling, being in their bodies, that people have when they are driving in like a giant lifted pickup.
Yes.
You know what I mean? When you're like, I hope someone else wrecks and crashes into me, because I will destroy them. It just makes you feel it's like a mounted police officer. I'm a cavalryman. Like, I'm 8 feet taller than everyone around me. They can't do shit. That's how these people clearly feel.
Yes.
Davison and Yoel are like, I'm just going to cheat in front of you. What are you going to do? Stop me?
Yeah, I was going to say Davison is the smallest on this list, but you can't accuse him of the confidence thing we talked about, because his confidence is full board, baby. And
Really?
and his durability, his power, but mainly that stupid durability, it seems to be doing nothing but fueling him, as he is, yes, an active champion as we're recording this, folks.
Yeah, but also the proprioception, the timing, those things stand out so strongly.
His counters.
You're supposed to throw combinations in striking. You know what I mean? You're supposed to use one punch to set up a different punch. Davison just throws single punches as leads, and he's just well, I know how this guy's going to move in advance. He's going to move in this direction. I can feel precisely where his chin is going to be. I don't have to hide this punch because he's scared. I know everybody's scared of me. That's why I can get away with cheating blatantly. So I'm just going to throw. He's going to react the way scared people react, and I'm going to know where he's going to be. It's not smart technical fighting. It is a total just throwing away all the fundamentals, all the setup, and all the defensive responsibility. No, it's just I know what I want to hit, and I'm just going to decide to hit the target.
Absolutely. Or How about even on the ground finishes, like against Perez, like the most low percentage shit. Like if it was me on a basketball court, it would just be like doing the stupid jump spin move where you clearly miss and everybody laughs at you to the point where like it's still a funny joke the next time you play because it was so bad. Like Figuerado will do that stuff with full confidence and land it. And nail it. Like I'm just gonna random like that turtle position. Like you shouldn't hit guillotines like that. And you even see Perez go, "There's no way he's gonna get this. I'm out. He's got this. He's got this. He's got this." And he starts freaking out because it shouldn't have worked.
Yeah, it shouldn't have worked. And it just it just shocks people by just getting away with things. It's all about getting away with things. I'm gonna I'll call back to something we said at the very beginning of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting inversion. I talked about how I evaluate camps based on their average guys. I think you can, by the same token, you can reverse that and evaluate somebody's athletic potential in contrast to the rest of their team, right? Like, I think now everyone's going to be jumping on this ship now that he's lost again and in more embarrassing fashion than ever. But Conor McGregor is a clear example of someone who is not representative of the talent that is otherwise produced by that team, right? I don't think I'm going to shock anyone by saying that Artem Lobov and Carl Pendred are neither as athletic nor do they appear as well schooled, which really suggests that McGregor has sort of picked up and figured a lot of this out on his own. Or at least he brought it to the table. A lot of the feel, the confidence that the other guys the coaches aren't giving them. Davis and Figueiredo, compared to his brother, who, his clout got that man in UFC, they have the same style. But it doesn't work as well for Francisco. No. It doesn't work half as well. Like Davison also gasses, he just ignores it.
Yeah. Doesn't care.
It doesn't. Yeah, so that's a great example of where they are basically playing the same game. They have essentially been given a very similar process. They even look super similar, and yet Davison, it just works 100 times better. And it works in a way that is like upsetting and shocking to opponents, that he could just do whatever he wants.
Absolutely. And I'll burn this example as we turn it over to the listener on our way out of here to the listener list. But I'll burn this example because I know it's not on there and it's clearly not on our list. But he almost has a very Derek Lewis feel, to his ground game in the sense of, I'm just going to, okay, it's cool, you can take me down. I'm not going to spend all this energy defending it because I'm going to save it for the get-up and, flex and bust out of here. And then, God forbid, you end up underneath either of those two gentlemen and they have hellacious ground and pound.
Yeah.
So
Derek Lewis definitely feels like he's going through life in a gigantic pickup in a huge 4x4, right?
Yes, yeah,
he has no fear. The moment he figured that out, how that applied to MMA, was when he was like, "I'm going to enter a Zen meditative state when people take me down, conserve my energy because I know I can just get up." And also, he fights like, I know I'm going to knock this dude out at some point. Yeah. All I have to do is just exist, and I'll always have that chance.
And he always talks. Oh, no, I was going to say, he always talks shit about, like, how he doesn't train, and you can't ever believe him, but he does kind of fight like he does train, like, a half hour a week, to his credit. Just want to add that.
He really does. He really does. Yep. And yet?
Yeah, he's overachieved, man, and hey, hats off to him there. All right, get your honorable mentions ready, but also be prepared to weigh in on these lists, Connor, as we go through. Fighting with Myself podcast at FWM_pod. I'm so bad at reading the names there. Thank you for submitting. He says, Michel Prazeres. We didn't mention his name. His name didn't come up. That's an interesting one. He's a mini Verdum who couldn't make weight at lightweight. He beat Gilbert Dohino Burns. You know who I'm talking about there?
Of course, yeah. I like Michel Prazeres, actually. I think he's a fun fighter.
Tractor, man. Yeah, that guy's an athletic freak too, and I'm sure there was a lot of those questionable moments in some of his fights too. I wouldn't doubt, as I broadly stereotype and take a shot at the guy. But Michael Venom Page. Sorry, go ahead.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Michael Venom Page. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. These are some interesting picks. These aren't the guys. Again, I think I sort of just fall into having a pretty narrow conception of what capital A athleticism is.
Right. Right.
And these guys, like, they don't have the look. They don't have the. Prazeres he does, although he's tiny. he's a Sean Shirkley sort of man.
Yeah, shout out to the Muscle Shark. But that proprioception point, right? Kind of with Page, I guess, is that would be his strongest point?
Absolutely. Yeah, the man has like a sense of timing, a feel for distance that is genuinely very impressive. Although the athletic confidence, maybe a bit more of a veneer than he would like us to think, because I think he would have fought a few more,
at this
meaningful opponents if he was really all that confident.
Yeah, at this point, and and I love my sport karate, guys, which was kind of funny. I totally signed off on your Kyokushin notes, as I brutally pronounce it. But the reason why you'll find that kind of martial art in other places, even places that are open now, but even back in the day, kind of had its restrictions, like Russia, as far as what martial arts they would allow in. That would be a karate style. Even places like Russia, who at certain points were against kind of traditional stylists, it was Kyokushin and like Wushu were like the only things they would kind of allow in there. And because that actually is more of the sport and the rougher karate, whereas what is often from like the Michelle Wattersons to the even Stephen Thompsons, who I love, but what they call sport karate, it's kind of funny how you would associate it. But if you actually watch it, the one GSP, at least the art that he comes from, what it was designed for, much rougher.
Yeah, it breeds a toughness in the same way that, say, wrestling does.
Yes.
Like you have to develop mental toughness almost more than anything else. You have to accept that I'm going to get hit a lot. In the body, too. That definitely makes sure you come out the other end of that process a very tough person, because body shots, as everyone knows, they really are worse than getting hit in the head.
And they almost pride themselves with the way they took it, and I kind of get that school of thought, too, because it was really dated, and I was around in the 90s, sadly. But you guys, Yoel Romero, John Jones, ones we've covered, right? His last on the list here I like, because this made my honorable mentions, Brock Lesnar, who beat a head-to-head of my number 5, so I kind of went against my logic there.
Super obvious choice, but not. I don't mean to disparage. Like, that's a great pick.
Yeah.
Who screams athletic ability more than Brock? Another guy who I think, like GSP, succeeded in not really being all that confident.
Yeah, just in spite of it, right? Yes.
Brock Lesnar famously hated getting hit in the face, and he was still, he went there like that win over Mark Hunt. That was a legit win. That was a good performance, and yeah. So Brock Lesnar, very good pick.
All right. Wow. I thought I was following this guy. At @high_light. There you go. I fixed that, sir.
Rich.
Yeah, Rich, man.
Rich. Friend of heavy hands as well.
One of the more, definitely funnier Twitter follows out there, by the way. At @high_light. The obvious answer is Yoel, who always seemed like he was a station wagon with a 10-cylinder engine, just barely able to handle the power. Look at him in the Machida fight, barely able to keep wheels on the ground as he attaches a classic gif right there.
Yeah, like he's almost, you're surprised a human body isn't bursting apart at the seams with the kind of stresses he's putting it through.
And that was my defense, even though I didn't have to defend it, obviously. But like with the Shane Carwin pick, where, he had no cardio, which, he fails there. And he fell off hard, but like you look at it, it's pretty straightforward. He wins and destroys everybody, including Brock Lesnar, until he doesn't, and then loses to a prime, unfortunate, still durable Junior Dos Santos, and he's done with the back problems and everything. Because again, to the similar with Rich's mention with his note there, sometimes these guys are so athletic that even their own bodies can't take the power it's producing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good pick as well.
This P4 Stan, I'm going to read as a display name, Brad Tavares would clap Robert Whitaker, I believe. At P4 Stan says Michael Chandler, who definitely is an honorable mention. I mean, he is like, you want to talk about, like, I like mentioning him as explosive because he's white and it kind of anti-racism, all the lazy commentators who go, oh, he's so explosive, Joe.
Yeah.
But Chandler is like legit explosive.
Oh, he's insane. Yeah, he's insane. He also has that thing that a lot of natural athletes have, which is like innately good recoverability.
Yeah.
And that's often a factor of conditioning as well. If you can tire out and then get a second wind, or you can get hurt, like surviving knockdowns is also often a factor of conditioning. But Chandler has that thing where, like, you could put him in a fight that was 30 rounds, and of course he'd be exhausted after 5. But you would still get 2 terrifying minutes at the start of each round, no matter how many more you tacked on. He would just recover and be able to do something horrific to you with like the 30 to 60 seconds of energy he had regained at the break. He's scary.
And good luck to you, to the rest of the lightweight. Not that obviously he can and will be beaten. I'm not trying to do that, overhype him, but like, I just say I feel bad for his competition for the fact that this guy figured out that he's gone to the body so much more now, and he can really just disguise that either, you know, up high or down low, and he found that perfect middle ground. That just seems like it's danger Will Robinson for whoever's standing across from him now, that he figured that out.
It's a great example, too, of getting away without tremendous depth, right? Because Michael Chandler's the type of athlete where he adds one switch-up.
Yeah.
He's been hitting the right hand to the body a lot more regularly. It's like that, a couple feints of the jab, and it's like just having to decide, is he throwing the right hand at my head or is he throwing it at the body is enough. Because you know he can cover the distance to get to you. You know he's capable of surprising you, and you have to worry about both of those things actually landing. So he doesn't have to really be that developed to have a really functional success.
Yep, it's a great shout. Could have been on any of our lists, and it's on a lot of these listener lists for good reason. He also has Jose Aldo, who we've covered and agree with.
Yeah.
Yoel Romero, who we covered and agree with. Chad Mendes, who we covered, and I believe we gave him enough due, but Chad Mendes, obviously, super freak athlete, just explosive dude, and I mean, just one of those, like, in his prime, it felt like I mean, not that anybody's really taking him down still in MMA, but like it just feels like impossible to touch his legs. Like no matter you could get Chad Mendes with 100 and whatever it was flu that he had against Nick Lentz, and a more prime Nick Lentz, by the way, when he wasn't quite as old, and it didn't matter. No one could get close to him.
Mm-hmm. Chad Mendes is also a guy who picked up new skills really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. Him and TJ Dillashaw, no one benefited on that team more than those two under the tutelage of Dwayne Ludwig. And then Chad Mendes, like almost more impressively, lost that. He stuck around with Team Alpha Male, lost that coaching. It's just still pretty damn good.
Yeah, and even with the proprioception when he came back with those counter right hands that he was able to land, right? Like just stuff that like you probably shouldn't be doing when you're rusty, but there he was.
Is that what that cream is called that he was using? Proprioception?
Yeah, something like that.
What's the name of that?
Dude, I don't know. I legit have psoriasis, though, Connor, and if there's something that I can take that can, help me in other departments as well, then bring it on, baby. What's up, Chad?
Is there a skin treatment for my eczema that will make me look like Chad Mendes?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize steroidal cream was like steroidal in that sense, but let's do it. Fuck it. Tape Study Chuck, my man Brad Taschuk from the MMA Analysis Podcast, also hosts to this here show sometimes. At Brazchuk has Randleman, who we covered, and the reason why it's a great pick, but again, Fedor kind of, I guess, trumped him in our standings, but great pick.
Absolutely. Can't deny it.
Yoel Romero, of course. GSP. He is the guy who has Dotson on here, so shouts to Brad for the Dotson pick. Anything you want to say on Dotson? I know you mentioned him. You thought that's where I was going, rightfully so, with one of them.
Yeah, Dotson would be an honorable mention of mine for sure. He's another guy who has, as you said, longevity. Career longevity is to me is just a great marker of like overall of pound for pound quality, but it is also clearly an indicator of athletic ability.
Right.
Not surprising. There's some crossover there. The freakiest athletes are often also the best fighters. But yeah, John Dotson, even now, like he's not even the man he used to be. He's still one of the fastest men in the entire sport. He's still, man, like. Why am I forgetting his name? The Georgian, Dvalishvili.
Yes, Marab.
Who most recently beat him in a really smart, like, coming-of-age kind of performance. He still didn't, like, he basically only beat John Dodson because you can coke John into a truly negative state where he just isn't getting anything done.
Yeah.
And he's not producing any positive results. But he still, like, that was how he beat him. In the same way that, Volkanovski beat Aldo by like freezing him up.
Yeah.
But he still wasn't able to like out-wrestle him. He wasn't taking him down and holding him down. No one can do that to John Dodson. Not even Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah, that's very true. Yep, that was very true. And that was like some of the best like MMA, well, at least at 191, I believe. And then toward the end of the first one too, some of the best clinch stuff as far as like interweaving attacks. And he needed all of it just to keep him occupied. It was more about keeping him occupied than controlled. Which is the case with a lot of these guys, right? You got to keep them occupied negatively or overwhelm them. His last selection is an admitted blind spot for us both, Connor. which was the ladies, Chris Cyborg.
Oh.
When you have, again, not picking on the ladies' divisions, but that's another one where just having athleticism alone is cheating, really, because you're already that much ahead of your contemporaries.
Yeah, you got a relatively much thinner talent pool, and so like in the same way that Fedor really stood out compared to the heavyweights of the early 2000s, Cyborg really stands out compared to especially in that division, even shallower than men's heavyweight has ever been by a good margin.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Yeah, great shout.
Juice to the Gills at Juice to the Gills. He says Khabib cheats his athletic ass through situations that less durable / athletic members of his team like Islam couldn't do. Emphasized by the durability, sure. Emphasized by their similar training background, but one being far more successful and dominant. Obviously, there is skill too. Not saying there isn't.
I think I'm kind of actually sad that I didn't say Khabib. Because, I've been banging that drum for a while. Like, Khabib, maybe he doesn't look, whether it's skin tone or muscle tone, he doesn't look like what some people picture when they hear athlete. But, man, he's so fast. He's so strong. He's terrifyingly tireless. The timing, and also, this is the greatest moment to go out on ever. Like, nothing impressed me more than his fight with Justin Gaethje, where we've talked about these athletes just picking up new skills and adapting their games better than the average people can.
Yeah.
Me and Ed Gallo, whose wrestling expertise we've already lauded, me and Ed Gallo are both like, Khabib doesn't hit open space takedowns, and he doesn't hit reactive doubles.
Yep.
He's never done these things, and he's tried them. They haven't looked good, So, like, this is a weak part of his game that Justin needs to watch out for. Guess how Khabib won that fight? 2 perfectly timed doubles in open space to get Justin Gaethje to the ground. He just picked it up because it was the right move to make in this particular fight. He's an unbelievable athlete, absolutely.
He's turning the corner so beautifully on those two. I was of that camp as well, man. I said the same thing. So even though I picked Khabib, like I almost feel like I was eating crow in certain instances because I didn't see like playing out exactly like that for sure.
Yeah, it's one where most people just couldn't help but be wrong because he just brings out new stuff that you just, if you're an analyst who goes by past footage to make your predictions, then you just couldn't have seen it coming. Certainly Justin Gaethje didn't.
Right.
And I also like that he made the comparison to Islam Makhachev,
yes,
like I have with several other fighters. You can really see the difference in with a similar training environment and everything, a similar structure, but with just put into 2 different physical specimens gives you.
Exactly. This person, I believe, put a list in, but this is funny. Sigma males get pegged, says, at Sunshine Sparkle 69, by the way. Getting me to read all these names, goddamn you guys. He says, give yourself some street cred by listing Drew McFetteries. Drew McFetteries is a name that I will always pop for, so I had to read that off.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Probably not one I would have thought of, but good shout.
Let's see, Manos de Piedra at feet_work. John Jones, he agrees with me there. He says, he comes from a family of super athletes. He has all the physical attributes, an insane chin, and cardio. Usman is very strong and has endless cardio. Josh Emmett, hey, shout out Phil McKenzie, as he grits his teeth, is also an elf with inhuman attributes. Wow. Okay, I guess he's a Phil McKenzie fan as well. Sounds like Manos de Piedra.
He's technically, I want to correct your listener there, or our listener as well, I think, Sunshine Sparkle 69. I've definitely heard from him before.
Okay.
Josh Emmett is technically a Falmer or colloquially a snow elf, okay? So just calling him elf is it's borders on racism.
Speaking of racism, if any of your, I don't know if any of your other listeners kind of trickle over if we start seeing some anti-Chinese stuff, but hopefully they don't know I'm half. We can keep that on the down low. Connor still loves half of me, folks. He still loves half of me, and I love him. So relax.
I love the half of you. I love the half of you that Ioana and Cheeto love. The good half, The good half.
Oh, I love it. I love it almost as much as the Josh Emmett stuff, which honestly, one of the I think I shared this with Phil too, and I'll share it with the audience. But probably one of the hardest times I popped just kind of listening to a podcast, and I can't listen to much MMA these days, mind you. So take that for a compliment. But it was when, I believe it was Phil made the comparison to Mad Max Fury Road. Like he looked like one of those extras, and I was like, poor Josh Emmett.
Yeah.
Holy crap, that was
Yeah.
so spot on.
Josh Emmett is a war boy. Absolutely.
He's a war boy.
Yeah, he does. What's the gesture? He does this before his fights. The V8 symbol. Mm-hmm. Josh Emmett's a great job. These guys are basically stealing all of my alternates. Just hopefully that's not a problem when we get to our honorable mentions. But Josh Emmett would absolutely have been a pick of mine.
I remember seeing some. I don't know what the article was, how serious it was, but it was like some kind of recreation of some some creature looked like prehistoric, and it looked like a person, like a vampire person with wings, and it looked like Josh Emmett. And I just tagged your co-host Phil McKenzie, and he knew exactly what it was. He's like, "Oh, it's perfect." I was like, "This poor Josh Emmett," but yeah. He adds lastly Jessica Andrade, Davison, Yair. Okay, that's an interesting one I haven't heard brought up. Yair, I'm down with that.
Mm-hmm.
Chandler, who we talked about, Alexander Rakic. I got to see more, but I got to see more fleshed out, but I could see that. And speaking of Chinese fighters, Zhang Weili. There we go.
An amazing athlete, absolutely. Yes. Speaking of not only just the obvious stuff, the speed, the power, the balance. All of these things are obviously incredible. But also talking about like developing a game very quickly. You're not supposed to be able to go from like what she looked like 2 fights before. To what she looked like when she fought Joanna. Joanna is a lifetime kickboxer. And even if Weili Zhang she's been fighting since she was very young, but she's still very young. She has not had as much time to develop her game.
Yeah.
And she was in there adapting, tightening up, like Khabib, tightening up punches that I had like specifically noted were weak parts of her game. Her left hook was so good in that fight in a way that it never had been before. So yeah, quick learning curve. And obviously just incredible physical specimen.
Great shout. I missed the ladies on here, so apologies for that. But last two, Benny Abs at Benjamin Abrigo, who also has a good podcast there y'all could check out there, the Fixed Fight Podcast with Kurt. He says, can't stop, won't stop loving these shows. Even if I tend to have an affinity for the fat boys rather than the athletes. I was gonna pull up because I was like, I don't like to read compliments, but I'm like, oh, you had a joke there. Sorry for stepping on it, Benny. My insecurity of compliments ruined that. But he I'm like, compliment, pull up. But he goes Lesnar, who we talked about, Rousey, another blind spot, right? Ladies, they're athletic cheaters for sure. She didn't even have lack of depth, right?
Yeah.
BJ Penn for real, he puts in parentheses. And I like that we joked about the BJ Penn and George St. Pierre matchup, but it was essentially 2 athletic cheaters from the complete opposite ends of the spectrum, right? It
really was. And BJ also maybe gets overlooked by us because, like Fedor, he doesn't exactly have the physique you associate with supreme athleticism. But yeah, I mentioned that before. Part of the reason GSP's win over BJ was so impressive, other than utterly mentally breaking him, which is something that GSP would go on to do throughout his career. That's another thing. When you fight an athlete like GSP, who is also that technical, you're never the same again.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I mean? You've seen the mountaintop, and you realize it's still way over your head, and you're never going to get there. So, but who are we talking about?
BJ.
Not GSP.
BJ versus GSP.
But BJ totally cheated with his takedown defense.
Yeah.
In every fight. Up to GSP. He just got away with not having good technical takedown defense because he had great balance and flexibility. And GSP was like, no, this is how you wrestle. And completely undid that.
And to his credit, not just the jiu-jitsu security, but he did have a developed get-up game, which was way more developed than his takedown defense, that people would actually build off of. But to that point, he almost had like an M. Night Shyamalan career, right? Where you start off so hot, and everybody wants you to recreate that same trick. And granted, he was obviously destined to shoot himself in the foot no matter how hard he worked, as clearly as his personality would reveal. But speaking strictly as a fighter, like, it was like, because again, you learn to wrestle by like, you learn jiu-jitsu by the Gracies, and you become the first American, to earn the gold medal. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, talk about having a hard act to follow. Then it's like, oh, I got to learn to wrestle for MMA? Oh, what, this guy Matt Linland and his team called Team Quest wants to teach me to wrestle? Like, in their prime run? Like, you couldn't have learned a better place to wrestle And from that, you've got
Yeah.
guys like Couture, who was campaigning at heavyweight and light heavyweight, going on UFC commentary when he was still a regular third man in the booth going, dude, I'll be real. I had a hard time getting him down, and I could not keep this kid down. And that's a good technical MMA wrestler like Couture. And as great as that is, and as much as us, BJ Penn fans back in the day love to have championed those things, it's kind of what ruined him because, he, like to your point, Connor, he was like, oh, I don't got to work on this stuff. And when he ran into a guy that just pushed his shit in like GSP the second time around, it really, he had 2 great fights. I don't want to write those off after that, but that really kind of set a ceiling.
Yeah, I think that's why I really don't like BJ, personally too, is like he's spoiled in every way, right? Like, got these. We've been talking about people who are arguably spoiled by their own natural talents throughout this entire episode. BJ is spoiled that way and economically. He's never had to try ever. Everything has come easily to him.
Yes, that is
like
true.
M. Night Shyamalan, who started his career making a movie about a guy who was made of glass. BJ Penn has now.
Hey man, I like Unbreakable.
It's a good movie. Yeah, it's certainly a better viewing experience than the videos we've seen of BJ Penn outside of
The Lava Shack?
Various Hawaiian. Yeah, the Lava Shack. Yeah, right.
It sounds like a joke, but it's not. It's sad.
Well,
it is. Like, yeah, it is. I think that was the last one of his, and then we go to Tommy Elliott at Moy Cowboy there on Twitter. No one ever says GSP, but they should. Well, Connor didn't let you down.
That's right. And actually, I responded to Tom's post there. I think GSP is absolutely a great athlete, and Tom knows. You don't want to let the guys who also happen to be like smart and well trained get away with being. They're already getting away with all the other stuff. Don't let them get away without being called a cheater. So good shout, Tom.
Absolutely. All right, that ends listener list. Before we get out of here, anybody that they didn't mention that you wanted to give a shout to, Connor?
I would have mentioned Chad Mendes. I would have mentioned Josh Emmett. I would have mentioned John Dodson. There was one other I just thought of. Give me a moment. Do you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah. I thought Francis Ngannou might come up, even though he's an obvious and kind of a near. I usually try not to, despite the Figuerado #1, I try not to get too current, but it is what it is. Mark Kerr, kind of. That was when I was looking to reach back, but that's a far reaching back. I put Melvin Gillard. I wanted to give him a shout because he was just a super just athletic archetype.
Yeah.
And Matt Hughes was the last one.
Pick. All very strong picks. MMA has given us a lot of dirty cheaters.
Yes.
Over the course of this sport's lifetime. Man, I had one more, and now it's lost to me. But you know what? I'll be spending the rest of my life yelling about these people and cursing them for being born with what I was not. So I think that'll do.
Hey, man, I'm just happy I got a Dr. Moreau and Darwin's Waiting Room reference in on the podcast, So
Yeah.
Hopefully I won't get tracked down by Cheek Shields next time I go into Extreme Couture or any of these other fighters. But that is the risk you run to give you this god-awful, honest, awesome, whatever you want to say it. But it's hardcore content, folks. That's what you come here for. That's what you get, baby.
That's right. The real nerd shit. That's what we're bringing to you.
I'm sorry to associate you with me with any of those, by the way. But yes, me and Connor, if it's not apparent by this episode and topic, we kind of appreciate the same types of fighters. So that's why
Yes.
That's why I love you, sir. And people should, if not love you, at least go check out and support your work, man. Anything you want to plug on the way out of here? Otherwise, I will forcefully plug your spots because people should follow you if they're not already.
Yeah, it's actually great if you don't love me. It's actually better if you hate me and still give me money, right? Because like I said, fuck the fans. And I like when the fans also say, fuck this guy making this crappy content. Bring it on. Give me your money and your vitriol. You can check out the Heavy Hands podcast. You can find my writing on bloodyelbow.com. And do make sure, if you want to hear bonus episodes, in fact, I've got one sitting in Audacity right here, ready to be posted, that you check out the Heavy Hands Patreon. This will be our third bonus episode for this month, which is admittedly better than we sometimes manage. My organizational skills, another area in which I'm just not as gifted as I really be, when you think about it.
Buy his merch.
Buy merch. Oh, yeah. Buy a shirt. Please buy a shirt. Go to Redbubble, the Heavy Hands store, and you can find a link in all of our YouTube posts of the episodes and everything. So, Heavy Hands, Patreon, merch, all that stuff.
Apologies for stealing a line from your podcast. That was the one link I didn't have written down here, so I had to try to trigger you to give it out. So I was like, I'm just gonna shoot that out. Hopefully,
I don't even know how to link it. I don't even know what link actually gets you to the store page. I'm just go to Redbubble and search Heavy Hands. Now that we've sold a few shirts, I think it actually shows up at the top of the results, so that should work. And we got to have you on Heavy Hands soon, Dan. That would be. Since you appreciate the same kind of awful, underprivileged fighters that Phil and I appreciate, we got to have you on. Maybe for that exact topic, that would be great.
Hey, if one of 5 off weeks the UFC now gives us every year, maybe we'll get together on one of them. But it's
pretty good.
I know.
I'll take 5.
Yeah, right. That actually feels like the truth. That doesn't even feel like a joke, does it? That doesn't even feel like a joke. But
no, I'm shocked that we're getting. We have this weekend off.
Yeah.
Which I was like, once they gave us 4 weeks off around the holidays. Once they get rolling again, it's going to be nonstop. And we have the first weekend of April is free too.
It's that edging. It's that UFC edging schedule, baby. On that note, which is apropos of the tone of this podcast, sadly. No, seriously, thank you for joining on the off week, Connor. It was a blast having you. As per usual, we went long, but that means it was a good show, and I certainly had a good time. So take that for what it's for what it's worth. And again, follow, as you can see in the bottom of the screen, at Boxing Bush. It's kind of the easier place to follow him on Twitter. He posts all the stuff there. As well as do I. You can find me at Dan Tom MMA. Thank you guys for using the click-through links. I'm not going to read through them here, but thank you for using them at mixedmartialanalyst.com if you want to ease your conscience for any Amazon purchases or on-it purchases. You can ease those with the click-throughs there. Otherwise, I appreciate your shares, likes, subscriptions down below, and just genuine support. Y'all are awesome. And until the fights start, until next time, protect your neck.